in this episode.
At the towering granite faces of Mount Rushmore, there's a hidden chamber inside President Lincoln's head.
Across the pond, the New York Public Library also hosts secret apartments for the staffs. There is a spiral staircase with 290 stone steps up to the clock room.
What if I told you you just won a round-the-world trip to visit the planet's most famous landmarks? But the so-called Iron Lady was only meant to stand for 20 years. After that, it was going to be demolished.
Hello, Brightsiders! Do you know what's hidden inside President Lincoln's head or at the Grand Station Terminal in New York? Today, I will reveal secrets about America's best-known landmarks you have never heard of. At the towering granite faces of Mount Rushmore, there's a hidden chamber inside President Lincoln's head, built initially to hold essential documents from US history. The original plan was to create a much larger carving of several vital moments in American history. Unfortunately, it was far too complicated to be completed, and a Hall of Records was chosen instead. The construction stopped for many years with the room left unfinished. However, the project was revived in late 90s and they completed the chamber. The hidden room tells the US's story to future generations, a time capsule of American history. Sadly, tourists can't access the secret room as it's too difficult to reach. Anyone running through the Grand Central Terminal to get to their train on time knows that you work up quite a sweat. Some hidden Manhattanites are also working up a sweat somewhere else at the station. Few commuters realize that the Grand Central Terminal has been home to a tennis club for decades. It mainly serves local sports fans and corporate groups, so most people don't even know it exists. Vanderbilt Tennis Club is located on the station's upper levels and includes a full gymnasium, one full-sized indoor hard court, and even a junior court. While it might seem strange to join, the Tennis and Fitness Club is quite popular among the locals. Most of the Supreme Court building is what you'd expect: courtrooms, offices, and other generally dull workspaces. But that's until you get to the 5th floor. The building has a hidden basketball court, nicknamed the highest court in the land. This court is frequented by many of the building's workers. The room was initially designed as a storage space, but some people started turning it into a makeshift court to practice their tennis game. The trend took off, and eventually it turned into a basketball court we know today. One of the most fascinating things about Niagara Falls is how naturally falling water is used to generate energy. The falls had slowed to a trickle or even stopped because of freezing and ice on several occasions. But a little known secret of the falls is that they can be turned off. And in 1969, the US Army Corps of Engineers did just that. To generate hydroelectric power, engineers developed ways to control the water's flow and fall to get the most out of it. All this water causes lots of erosion, so a facelift was planned. Unfortunately, the plan ended up being a bit of a failure. Meanwhile, this lady is no failure. She's an icon, a symbol of hope, and one of the most recognizable figures in the world. And she wears size 879 shoes. The Statue of Liberty is one of the most recognizable structures in the USA and in the world. In 1886, the monument wasn't just symbolic. For 16 years, the statue functioned as a fully operational lighthouse. Tourists at the US landmark can head to her crown for a stunning city view, but there used to be a room in the torch that could be accessed. Unfortunately, the ladder to the torch room was damaged by a shockwave from a nearby explosion, making the room inaccessible from 1916 until today. and it hasn't welcomed any visitors since. When the Brooklyn Bridge was first under construction, the engineers faced two significant problems. Well, the city didn't have enough money to pay for the whole project, that's a first, and local wineries were refusing to relocate out of the path of the construction. The engineer managed to find a great solution to both problems. They helped finance the bridge by building wine cellars and renting them out to local businesses that needed the extra storage. That's a pretty genius approach to financing a bridge, actually. Today, the city of New York has taken ownership of the cellars and stripped the caverns of their original functionality. Now, they are primarily unused and full of maintenance equipment. Disneyland has fast become one of the most famous landmarks in America. Hardcore fans might think they know all of the park's secrets, but some might even surprise regular parkgoers. Hidden behind an unmarked door in Disneyland's New Orleans Square, you can find a posh, expensive restaurant called Club 33. If dining here is on your to-do list for your next vacation, you better start saving your money right now. The price to enter is a little expensive, costing around $25,000 to join, plus an annual fee of $12,000. If you feel wrong about never being a part of Club 33, maybe this will cheer you up. The waiting list can be up to 14 years long, and even Walt Disney himself never got to see it. The Golden Gate Bridge was once the world's longest suspension bridge. This eye-catching 1.7-mile-long feat of engineering was completed in 1937. While many people know that the bridge is constantly being repainted, did you know that the paint color, which looks red, is called International Orange? Interestingly, the color was just a primer, but it turned out to be quite visible through the thick fog. The bridge's original color plan was suggested to be black with yellow stripes to maximize its visibility for passing ships. That's quite an ugly combination, I think. Most people who visit the Lincoln Memorial are in awe of the size and view of the reflecting pool. Some even spend all of their energy trying to find the famous typo carved into the walls. In the line, "With high hope for the future," the sculptor mistakenly spelled the future with an E instead of an F. Yet they tried filing it in, but the typo is still visible. Visiting the Gateway Arc to look at the city of St. Louis is like looking back in time. Most visitors don't know that the Arc also provides a glimpse back to its construction. Built to withstand earthquakes and high winds, the Arc can move and bend as much as 18 inches in high winds. The Arc is the tallest national monument in the United States, standing at 630 feet. Few people realize that it's 630 feet wide as well. That's impressive. The most peculiar thing about this spectacular construction isn't just its story, but that it also contains the stories of over 600,000 people from St. Louis. Hidden underneath the deluxe Wolford Astoria Hotel is a secluded platform called Track 61, part of the Grand Central Terminal. A railway car believed to be designed for President Franklin D. Roosevelt was left in the station for decades before being removed. This private train car was able to pull into the underground station where he could come and go unseen by the public. Unfortunately, the car turned out to be just for transporting parts of construction materials, which is not really as cool as transporting a president. The Liberty Bell features one of history's most famous repair jobs. Well, actually, lack of repair jobs. The bell was tested, split, and repaired when first received. And it just got worse from there. After nearly 90 years of use, a narrow crack formed in the Liberty Bell in 1840s. When the city of Philadelphia sought to repair the bell in 1846, metal workers made the crack even worse. Attempts were made to repair the existing rupture in the bell, but it was subsequently fractured beyond repair. After all of this, it had to be taken out of service for good. The bell we see today is just a replica. Not one person alive today has heard the authentic original sound of the bell. That's all for today, and guys, remember, let's learn something new every day together with Brightside.
If you're looking for the coolest accommodation in Paris, you may consider an apartment inside the Eiffel Tower. When Gustave Eiffel was designing his most famous construction, he added a private apartment for himself right at the top. It's rather spacious, especially for Paris, where people often live in apartments 10 times smaller. It had a workshop, living space, a dining room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and piano. But there was no bedroom, so it's likely that no one ever slept there. No one lives there now, except for the mannequins of Eiffel himself, his daughter, and one of Thomas Edison. Members of the scientific community chosen by Eiffel and other notable guests were allowed to visit the property, and Edison was one of the chosen ones. Now, across the pond, the New York Public Library also hosts secret apartments for the staff. These apartments used to be a normal thing in different library buildings across the city, but now there are only 13 left out of 30. One superintendent lived in the library on 42nd Street for many years, and his own daughter was even born inside that building. The apartments came in different sizes, and some had up to 8 rooms. By 2006, the last resident custodian retired, and now these apartments are used for other library needs. It's known as the tallest building in the world, but Burj Khalifa is actually not one, but several constructions connected into one. It has a Y-shaped plan, and if you look at it from above, it's scary. I mean, it resembles a spider lily. It's uber flexible and can bend a little bit when there are strong winds or even earthquakes, so it stands safe and strong. Burj Khalifa has over 24,000 windows, and it takes a crew of 36 people around 3 months to clean them all. There's a crypt beneath the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and visitors pass through it every day. The first architect of this famous landmark designed it as a grand vestibule, which means just a big entrance hall. Several years later, plans changed, and the room was supposed to become the final resting place for George Washington and his wife Martha. She agreed to it, and architects changed the Capitol plans to add a tomb below the famous rotunda. They also planned to put a statue of Washington on top, and there was going to be a 10-foot hole in the ceiling so people could look down and see his tomb from the rotunda. But Congress couldn't agree on all the details of this memorial, and the tomb remained empty. Years later, workers closed the big hole in the floor, which was meant to give light to the tomb because cold air was leaking into the rotunda. At some point, the crypt was used for bicycle parking. Today, it has statues of famous people from the 13 original colonies, and George Washington and his wife are buried out back. No, actually, they're in Mount Vernon. There's a hidden clock and a calendar in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The 83-foot obelisk works like a giant sundial, using its shadow to show the time and even mark special days like the solstices. When the sun is at its highest point in the sky, called solar noon, the shadow of the obelisk falls on a line of stones on the ground. On the winter solstice, the shadow reaches its farthest point. On the summer solstice, the shadow is much shorter. There are also 5 other special markers that show when the sun enters different zodiac signs. The long, thin granite line running from the obelisk toward the Pope's window shows exactly when it's noon. British seaside Brighton stands on top of a secret network of underground tunnels, with Victorian sewer systems and a hidden road. They say the tunnels were built below the royal pavilion, so that King George IV could go on, secret dates. History experts say it's not true, and the king actually used tunnels to keep his servants out of sight when they moved between the pavilion and the stables. The 30 miles of tunnels are now over 150 years old, and you can see some of them with an organized tour. But some parts of them are still in use. One tunnel serves as an emergency relief valve for heavy rain. Another tunnel has a shooting range inside. The bascule chambers inside the Tower Bridge are one of the coolest hidden spaces in London. These spacious rooms were built as an operational center to let the bridge's huge counterweights move for the bridge to open. They were the final stage in the construction of the bridge. Now, if you're lucky, you can see these chambers on a special behind-the-scenes tour of the bridge. You'd have to descend 115 steps below water level until you get into the cold and damp space with rumbling overhead. Sometimes they organize concerts here, and the acoustics are just perfect. In the early 1930s, there was a real race in New York to construct the tallest building. Once 40 Wall Street was finished, it won the title. But then, the architect of the Chrysler Building added a spire to its top, and it became the new champion. The spire was waiting all this time inside the top of the building. Workers had to carefully lift each section of it and assemble it on top. They used nearly 4 million bricks to finish the whole building and laid them all out by hand. There were also some elements from Chrysler's automotive empire, like hubcaps, fenders, and radiator caps. There was a private apartment and office on the top of the building for the founder of the Chrysler Corporation. They say he liked to brag he had the highest toilet in Manhattan. I'm sure he was flush with pride. The Capitol Records Building in Los Angeles has been sending secret messages since it opened, and you need to know Morse code to understand them. That secret message is Hollywood. The light has been sending the same message since the opening in 1956, but it has changed a couple of times. In 1992, to celebrate Capitol Records' 50th anniversary, it flashed Capitol 50. Then, before Katy Perry's album release in 2013, the message was also changed, but hardly anyone noticed the difference. One more fun fact about the building, it was the first circular office building in the world. Producer Samuel Lionel Roxy Rothafel designed a hidden apartment for himself in the Radio City Music Hall in New York City. He chose for the apartment, now called the Roxy Suite, to be decorated in the Art Deco style. It has 20-foot-high ceilings covered in gold leaf and walls with floor-to-ceiling plush drapes. Some of the most famous guests of the apartment were Judy Garland, Walt Disney, and Samuel Goldwyn. Today, it only opens for special occasions and looks exactly the same as it did in 1936. You might be able to rent it out for a private event, but they say the prices are very high. Grand Central Station in New York has a great hidden activity for travelers. There are tennis courts in a secret space named the Annex. This area used to be a recording studio. Now the location is known as the Vanderbilt Tennis Club, and you can visit it and play tennis there. The U.S. Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. has a secret sports facility where clerks, off-duty police officers, and other Supreme Court employees can play basketball. This court, the basketball court, is located on the top 5th floor of the building and goes under the nickname the highest court in the land. There's a fun sign next to it saying, "Playing basketball and weightlifting are prohibited while the court is in session." Well, we wouldn't want to tempt the justices to, drop everything they're doing to play a game of horse, but I think that would be fun. To energize this amazing venue, which comes with a hefty price tag of around $2.3 billion, you'll need 28 megawatts of power, enough to supply electricity to about 21,000 homes. It was originally projected to cost just $1.2 billion, but challenges arose and the budget ballooned. I'm talking about the Sphere in Las Vegas. This place is so massive, it could fit the entire Statue of Liberty from its base to its torch. Standing at 366 feet tall and stretching 516 feet wide at its largest point, it can accommodate up to 20,000 people if they're all standing. If you want to sit down, the capacity drops to 18,600. Still, that's enough room for the entire population of some small nations, like Palau. Now, let's dive into its construction. To kick things off, you need land, and the Sands provided the site. They dug out 110,000 cubic yards of dirt and rock to get things rolling. Just to put that into perspective, a cubic yard of loose, dry topsoil weighs around 2,100 pounds. If it's wet, that weight can shoot up to about 3,000 pounds. In total, they excavated the weight equivalent of 3,500 adult male megalodons. If we're talking dry soil, of course. The external sphere is 30% taller than the inner dome. Building the dome's roof took 3,000 tons of steel, which included 32 hefty trusses, each weighing 100 tons. Altogether, the dome weighs around 13,000 tons and covers a surface area of 220,000 square feet. When the construction team reached the halfway mark with the dome trusses, they had to shift the crane to the southern end of the site to finish the remaining trusses. That move alone took 2 days. It's no surprise considering the crane used is the 4th largest crawler crane in the world. Transporting it from Belgium was hard. First, it was shipped to California. Then, 120 tractor-trailers took it to Las Vegas. Another 18 days were needed to set it up using a secondary crane. The Gateway Arch is an impressive 630-foot monument situated in St. Louis, Missouri, with a base that matches its height. It's just as wide as it is tall. Made of stainless steel, this cool curved arch is not only the tallest of its kind, but also the tallest building in Missouri. Some say it's even the tallest human-made structure in the Western Hemisphere. It was built to celebrate the westward expansion of the U.S. and is officially dedicated to the American people. You'll find it in Gateway Arch National Park, which, fun fact, is actually the smallest national park in the U.S. It doesn't even feature a natural area. The arch was designed by a Finnish-American architect who won the design competition for design concept in the 40s. However, it took some time for construction to begin. The whole building process started in 1963 and was wrapped up in 1965. It cost the U.S. Treasury around $13 million. You may say, hey, it's nothing compared to the sphere you mentioned previously. Yeah, but back in the 60s, $13 million could buy you what $96 million can buy you today. But still, the arch is way cheaper than the sphere. The construction bidding was pushed from the 20th December 1961 to the 22nd of January 1962, with around 50 companies interested, and the winning bid signed on the 14th of March 1962, backed by a $2.5 million city subsidy. McDonald, not McDonald's Construction, the company in charge of the project, built a cool 30-foot viewing tower for crowds to check out their epic project. In 1963, about 1 million people showed up to take a look at the project in progress. Initially scheduled for completion in 1964, the arch was only revealed to the public in 1967. Stan Wolf, the project manager at McDonald Construction Company, mentioned that constructing a 62-story building is simpler than building an arch. He explained that with a building, it's all about stacking things straight up. With an arch, you're dealing with a lot of curves. Now, this building has set a bunch of world records. The tallest existing structure, the tallest building ever, the building with the most floors. This iconic tower is the centerpiece of a massive mixed-use development featuring 30,000 homes, 9 hotels, 7.4 acres of park, 19 residential skyscrapers, the vast Dubai Mall, and an artificial lake, essentially a mini-city. Designed to attract global attention and investment, the Sheikh aimed for the extraordinary. Ever felt a chill in the air while flying? At the top of the Burj Khalifa, it might feel a bit like you're on a plane, with temperatures about 11 degrees cooler than at ground level. The building's spire, made of over 4,000 tons of steel, stands at 660 feet tall, although it's mainly for looks, as the building would still be an impressive 1,919 feet without it. The exterior consists of reflective glass panels and aluminum, designed to handle the fierce desert sun and wind while providing great thermal performance. Those glass panels are no joke. Each weighs about 800 pounds. The building is equipped with 57 elevators, including the world's fastest double-deck variety, zipping passengers up and down at speeds of up to 33 feet per second. But if you're up to some cardio, there are 2,909 stairs leading to the 160th floor. No thanks, after you. Given how tall the Burj Khalifa is, you may mistakenly think water might be an issue. I mean, it's obviously hard to pump it up there, but it's not. Burj Khalifa's system delivers around 250,000 gallons of water daily through many miles of pipes. The temperature regulation isn't a problem either, as the air conditioning system is so powerful that its effect is comparable to melting 13,000 tons of ice in a day. Right. And what about cleaning those windows? There's a 36-worker crew to take care of all 24,348 windows. Want to guess how much time it takes? Not a week, not a fortnight, not even a month. It takes around 3 months, and this task is performed 4 times a year. 3 by 4 gives us 12, so yeah, it's pretty much a non-stop process. Elizabeth Tower is one of the greatest and most iconic constructions of all time. Don't tell me it's the first time you've heard about it. It's just another name for Big Ben. One of the main secrets of this tower is its foundation, which is crucial to its stability. The tower's base is square, and it measures 40 feet on each side. For such a tremendous construction, a stable foundation is crucial, so Big Ben's construction foundation is 12 feet thick. Still, it's not the foundation it's famous for, but the clock. How do we care for something this high up? For the past 150 years, reaching the top of the clock tower has meant tackling a spiral staircase with precisely 334 steps. There is a spiral staircase with 290 stone steps up to the clock room, followed by 44 to reach the belfry, which gives us those 334 steps I mentioned before, and an additional 59 to the top of the spire. They're currently adding elevator shafts, but don't get too excited. They're mainly for maintenance and security and won't be for regular use. So once you reach the top, there's a door that opens to a narrow walkway behind each of the 4 clock faces. It's a tight fit, just spacious enough for an average person. If you venture a bit further on the stairs, you'll find another door leading to the clock room, which holds the impressive clock mechanism. Now, the clock mechanism is an engineering wonder all on its own, featuring a clever system of weights, gears, and a pendulum that keeps time. The pendulum, measuring 14 feet, plays a vital role in ensuring the clock's precision. As they say, England swings like the pendulum do.
Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Bologna used to look like modern-day Manhattan. No one knows exactly how many towers resembling skyscrapers it used to have, but the most likely number is at least 100. The tallest of them was around the same height as Big Ben. When the towers were built, Bologna was one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction projects were massive and ambitious. Someone built cathedrals and town halls, and the richest noble families also erected towers, possibly as a symbol of status and wealth. There was no place in the city center to build grand castles, so they had to go up with the construction. They didn't actually live in those towers, but in smaller structures next to them. The towers served for defensive purposes. It took between 3 and 10 years of work to build one tower, and it was a really tedious process. Each of them had a steady foundation deep underground and a base made of big blocks of selenite stone. The rest of the tower was becoming thinner and lighter the higher it went. In the 13th century, they demolished many of the towers, and others just collapsed by themselves. Some of them were later reused as city towers, shops, or residential buildings. Now you can see only 22 towers still standing in the center of Bologna. 2 of them have become the unofficial symbol of the city, mentioned in every guidebook. Another historical surprise coming from Italy is that gladiators weren't only male. Gladiatrix were rare, but they did exist. There's evidence that several women took part in Rome's public games. In ancient texts, these women were often called ludia, or mulieres, but not ladies. Some scholars think it means that it was mostly lower-class women in the arena. The term gladiatrix wasn't used in ancient times. It was first coined in the 1800s. Women who chose to become gladiators seemed to do so for independence, fame, financial rewards, and probably debt remission. They were most likely honored like male gladiators. All this was a bit tricky to accept in Roman society at that time, and women's roles in it. At the beginning of the current era, the Roman Senate passed a law prohibiting free-born women under 20 from taking part in arena games. Emperor Septimus Severus banned all women from the arena in the year 200 of the current era. He was probably afraid that women might want to compete in the Olympic Games. It would seriously mess up the existing social order. Pineapples were once the equivalent of designer bags and watches today, a symbol of wealth and status in Britain. You can still see them at the top of the western towers of St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the most famous landmarks of London. Explorers who came back from the Americas described pineapples with so much enthusiasm that everyone was dreaming about trying the king of fruits, as it was called. Pineapples need very high temperatures and years to mature. And despite the cold and rainy climate of England and Scotland, you could see pineapples growing in any wealthy country house garden by the end of the 18th century. They even installed special greenhouses called pineries with heating systems. A single pineapple was worth up to 80 pounds, which is about $15,000 today. Of course, people would hardly eat this expensive beauty, but send it as a gift or display on a dining table until it would rot. Folks who couldn't afford to buy a pineapple would sometimes rent one to show off wealth at a party. The king of fruits became a part of various designs and tableware for the rich. Stone pineapples on gateposts and the pineapple atop the Wimbledon trophy are living memories of that time. Around 1820, there were so many pineapples imported from abroad that they started losing their luxury status. 100 million years ago, there were giant crocodiles living in the Sahara Desert. In the 1990s, paleontologists found fossilized skeletons of primitive crocodiles, including the so-called supercroc. They discovered several partial skeletons from 110 million years ago. This prehistoric giant with a head as large as an adult human was about 40 feet long. That's about 2 times as tall as a giraffe. The croc thrived both in water and on land as part of a diverse ecosystem of ancient North Africa. The expeditions to the Sahara found a whole lost world of ancient crocodiles, with some species that resembled modern animals. One of them was the dog croc. With its tall legs and keen sense of smell, it moved through the surroundings, much like a dog. Another fascinating find was the duck croc, a 3-foot-long crocodile with duck-billed platypus-like features. It was adapted for life on land rather than water. And then there was also the rat croc, a small 2-foot-long crocodile. This species had front teeth, perfect for digging up insects. These prehistoric creatures were more agile, active, and probably more intelligent than today's crocs, who are passive hunters. If noise-canceling headphones had been invented in the 19th century, they would have come in really handy. On the 27th of August 1883, the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced a catastrophic eruption. It produced what is believed to be the loudest sound ever recorded. As Krakatoa collapsed, it triggered tsunamis with waves reaching 151 feet that traveled as far as South Africa. Krakatoa was an uninhabited volcanic island that hadn't erupted for 2 centuries before this terrible day. The eruption took the lives of over 30,000 people and caused extreme fluctuations in air pressure, perceived as sound. A barometer at a gasworks 100 miles from Krakatoa recorded 172 decibels. An average human can withstand up to 130 decibels of sound without getting in serious trouble. This intense pressure ruptured the eardrums of sailors on the British ship Norham Castle, which was 40 miles away from Krakatoa. The sound wave from it circled the globe, and people could still hear it even 3,000 miles away, where it resembled cannon fire. The late 1800s were a golden era for grand mustaches. But there was one problem. You couldn't enjoy a cup of tea with this kind of facial hairstyle. The heat from the tea would melt mustache wax and make the ends droop. Fine gentlemen had to struggle because of it until the invention of the mustache cup.
Harvey Adams, a British potter, likely invented the mustache cup in the 1870s. He patented a butterfly-shaped ledge inside the cup with a hole to sip through. Thanks to it, the mustache didn't get wet. These cups quickly became a hit, first in the UK and then across Europe. In the United States, they were sold at stores like Sears and Marshall Field's, now part of Macy's. Mustache cups came in various shapes and sizes. Some, like farmers' cups, could hold up to a pint of tea. Others were smaller porcelain pieces shaped like conch shells or decorated with the owner's name. They often came with matching saucers. Lord Byron, one of the greatest British poets, kept numerous dogs and cats and a whole bunch of exotic animals. There was a monkey, a crocodile, a fox, peacocks, a bear, and several badgers. When Byron attended Trinity College, Cambridge, college rules prohibited keeping dogs on the grounds. He got really angry and decided to go around the rules. Byron brought a tame bear as his pet. The college authorities argued with him, but since the statutes did not specifically mention bears, they had no legal grounds to remove either the bear or its owner. Byron walked the bear on a chain, talked to it, and even considered applying for the bear to become a student at the college. We still don't know how and where Byron got the bear, but when he left Cambridge, he took the bear with him to his estate in London.
What if I told you you just won a round-the-world trip to visit the planet's most famous landmarks? Nice, right? But there's a catch. You might be visiting them for the last time in your life. That's because these landmarks are threatened to disappear during your lifetime. Yikes! Ah, Paris, the city of love. For our modern eyes, it's hard to imagine the city without its most famous landmark, the Eiffel Tower. But it wasn't always there, of course. Gustave Eiffel, the tower's architect, was commissioned to expose it during the 1889 World Fair. But the so-called Iron Lady was only meant to stand for 20 years. After that, it was going to be demolished, except that, this plan was never implemented. The tower wasn't taken down because of an antenna built on top of the tower, and it conducts wireless signals. But there's a problem. The Iron Lady is made of iron. And with time and bad weather, which Paris happens to get a lot of, iron deteriorates. It rusts, and this rusting makes the iron weak, up until the point where it can crack. And if a tower that is made purely of iron starts to crack, you know what this means. No more selfies eating croissants in front of the famous Tour Eiffel. Apparently, French authorities are aware that this is happening, but instead of repairing the whole tower, they're kind of just painting over the rust. Your next stop is in beautiful Rome. You are here to visit, you guessed it, the Colosseum, one of the world's most visited monuments. The gladiators used to put on shows there. Well, you might as well say arrivederci to it while you can. Like a lot of ancient monuments, the Colosseum is in danger of disappearing. It survived for almost 2,000 years since it was commissioned by Emperor Vespasian. But due to yearly exposure to harsh weather, the monument is getting weaker. The problem here is mainly snow. When snow falls upon the Colosseum, the freezing water infiltrates the cracks of the rocks and makes them bloat. You know, like when you put a soda can into the freezer and the bottom pops out? I know, snow is a kind of infrequent visitor in Rome, but even rare below-zero temperatures can damage the Colosseum seriously. And since we can't control the weather, who knows how long we'll get to see this beauty around? After hopping on a red-eye to India, you arrive at the unique Taj Mahal. It's even more mesmerizing in person than it is in pictures. The Taj is one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. But why is it at risk of disappearing, you might ask? The monument was finished way back in 1643. It was made with pristine white marble as a gift from Emperor Shah Jahan to his beloved wife. But if our white shirts get dirty just by stepping outside the house, imagine an open-air monument that has existed for over 4 centuries. The Taj Mahal is located in the city of Agra, right beside the Yamuna River. Over the years, the region has become very polluted, and all of this pollution is helping to destroy the Taj. India's Supreme Court has been on the case for many years now, and they say the monument is turning greenish and brown. So, high authorities decided that either the local government restores the Taj Mahal completely, or they'll shut it down. Or worse, destroy it. For the good of humanity, I hope they decide to restore it already. Otherwise, we'll be down to only 6 wonders. Finally, you've made it to South America. More specifically, you're now in the mountainous country of Peru. If you're not used to such high altitudes, you might get a little dizzy. But it's worth it to see the mesmerizing Incan ruins of Machu Picchu. The city is located at over 7,000 feet above sea level, and no one knows how the Incas built such a sophisticated village. That's why the site attracts around 440,000 visitors every single year. But since regulation is not so strict, the site is also slowly deteriorating. Machu Picchu may be the victim of something known as over-tourism. I mean, if you look at any footage from the site on a normal day, it's pretty packed up. And even if it's a stone-made town and stones are pretty resistant, they do suffer from erosion. Man-made or weather-made. Oh boy, I really don't like the sound of that. There's another stone monument that you need to check off your list. Can you guess which one it is? Yup, Stonehenge. Located in the peaceful hills of Wiltshire, England, Stonehenge has been around for over 5,000 years. Well, nobody knows exactly when it was built, but bear with me. If the only cause for disappearance would be erosion, then it would make the monument millions of years before it disappeared. But that's not the case. Since 1995, there have been multiple proposals from British authorities to build an underground tunnel that connects southeast and southwest England. The thing is, the tunnel passes underneath Stonehenge, and it might rock the site's foundation. Get it? Rock? Anyway, since the project was suggested, local supporters of the monument have found a Save Stonehenge alliance to keep the monument safe. They strongly believe that any enterprise, such as this tunnel, will severely harm the site. Egypt. This time, to arrive at your destination, you travel in style. And by that, I mean camels. Just for the photo op, of course. But why are you here? You came to check out the Great Sphinx. You know, the one with the broken nose? The Sphinx was also built way back in the day. Try over 4,000 years ago. And back then, they used what they had at their disposal, limestone. Now, some researchers think that hazardous weather may be damaging the Sphinx's limestones. You see, they're very porous types of rock, so water easily infiltrates inside of them, making erosion stronger and faster. But water is also coming from down below. Unlike the pyramids of Giza, the Great Sphinx was carved directly from the bedrock. And right underneath the monument, there's a riverbed, which also infiltrates into the Sphinx, making it weaker. Fingers crossed that Egypt doesn't get a lot of rainfall in the next few centuries. I hope you brought your swimsuit because it's time to dive deep into the Dead Sea. Except that you probably won't get too deep. You know, since there's so much salt in the water that you basically only float. Fun fact, this sea is 10 times saltier than the ocean. It may be a little ironic that the Dead Sea is at risk of actually perishing, but it's true. The lake level is dropping 4 feet every year. It has to do with one of the sea's main tributaries. A tributary is a river that flows into a much larger body of water. The thing is, the region is not so rich in natural water, so some of the local authorities ended up diverting small tributaries for basic human uses. But since every action has a reaction, the Dead Sea is now facing some difficulties. Back in the USA, it's time to visit the city that never sleeps. And if you've understood this trip by now, you already know the landmark we're visiting. It's Lady Liberty. It may come as a surprise to some, but the famous Statue of Liberty was originally copper. It's turned green due to oxidation. I mean, maybe I would also turn green if I was constantly exposed to New York's harsh weather. Some researchers say that air pollution can also speed up oxidation processes, threatening the long life of Lady Liberty. Of course, New York City does its share of maintenance. Hopefully it'll be enough for us to keep seeing the statue during our lifetime. Hey, it's time to head back home. I sure enjoyed this trip. Hope you did too. Let's hope we can still visit these places.
Hey, if you think Stonehenge is one of the oldest stone monuments ever, well, let me introduce you to Göbekli Tepe. Buckle up, we gotta travel to Turkey to meet this really old guy. Yeah, he's too old to travel. Jokes aside, Göbekli Tepe, an archaeological site located in southeastern Turkey that dates back to the Neolithic period around 10,000 BCE. It's considered to be one of the oldest and most significant archaeological discoveries in recent times. The site consists of a series of circular and rectangular structures made of stone pillars. Yeah, it does look like its younger brother Stonehenge. Some of those pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and other symbols. Now, you maybe wonder, hey, why on earth did they make such a fascinating building? What was its purpose? Sorry, I got no answer for that. The purpose of the site is still unknown, but it is believed to have been a ceremonial center for the ancient people who lived in the area. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has challenged long-held beliefs about the development of human civilization, as it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier than previously thought. Okay, pack your stuff, our travel's just started. Next destination, Masada. It's an ancient fortress located in Israel on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. Hey, look at that view, spectacular, huh? It was built by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, and it was very smartly built. Within the fortress, there were various facilities such as storehouses, barracks, a palace, and a set of cisterns capable of holding approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rainwater. People living there believed that the collected runoff from a single day's rainfall could provide sustenance for over 1,000 individuals for a period of 2 to 3 years. Access to the fortress was limited to 3 steep and winding paths leading up to fortified gates. Still, at one point, the fortress was occupied by people who had fled Jerusalem after the city was captured by the Romans. They held out against the invaders for several months, but eventually they were defeated. But these guys didn't surrender. The story of Masada has become a symbol of resistance and bravery. Today, Masada is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next flight is going to be short. We're popping over to Egypt to see the Karnak Temple Complex. It's a vast ancient Egyptian temple complex located in the city of Luxor, Egypt. It was built over a period of 2,000 years and covers an area of more than 200 acres. The complex is dedicated to the worship of the deity Amun-Roka. Wait a minute, that should be Amun-Ra, and it was one of the most important religious centers in ancient Egypt. The Karnak Temple consists of several temples, chapels, and other buildings, including the Great Temple of Amun, the Temple of Khonsu, and the Temple of Ptah. Ptah! The Great Temple of Amun is the largest and most impressive temple in the complex, with massive columns, statues, and other decorations. One of the most famous features of the Karnak Temple complex is the Avenue of Sphinxes, which is a long avenue lined with Sphinx statues that leads from the entrance of the complex to the Great Temple of Amun. Another notable feature is the Hypostyle Hall, which is a massive hall with 134 columns that are over 70 feet high. The Karnak Temple Complex is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's considered one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt and provides a fascinating glimpse into the religion and culture of ancient Egypt. Hey, we can't hop on the next flight and leave Egypt until we see the Pyramid of Djoser. It has another name, by the way. It's also known as the Step Pyramid. This ancient Egyptian site is located in Saqqara. It was built during the 27th century BCE for the pharaoh Djoser by his architect Imhotep, who is considered one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. People believe this pyramid is the first monumental structure built entirely of stone and is an important example of early Egyptian architecture. The pyramid originally stood at 203 feet tall and was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards. It was constructed in 6 layers, each smaller than the one below it, giving it the distinctive step-like appearance. The pyramid was used as a burial place for Pharaoh Dozier and was surrounded by a vast necropolis that contained the tombs of many other important officials. The Grateful Dead? The Pyramid of Dozier has several renovations and additions over the centuries, including the addition of a limestone casing that covered the original step structure. However, much of the pyramid was destroyed over time, and today only the central core remains. Despite this, it remains an important archaeological site and a popular tourist attraction in Egypt. Alrighty, we're ready to move on. There's one more pretty recent discovery we gotta see today. The Tower of Jericho was only discovered during excavations in the 1950s and 60s. It's an ancient stone tower located in the city of Jericho in the West Bank. Just like Göbekli Tepe, this one is believed to be one of the oldest stone structures in the world, dating back to approximately 8000 BCE. The tower stands at over 28 feet tall. It's made up of two main sections, an inner tower and an outer tower, which are connected by a series of stairs. The purpose of the Tower of Jericho is not entirely clear, but it is believed to have served as a defensive structure or a watchtower. It may have also had religious significance, as it was located near a sacred spring. The Tower of Jericho is a significant archaeological site and has provided valuable insights into the early history of human civilization. It's open to visitors and is a popular destination for tourists interested in ancient history. Now, this ancient site even got attention from Netflix, and they made a movie where the action takes place in Mohenjo-Daro. This site was a major center of the Indus Valley civilization in present-day Pakistan. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, with a population estimated to have been around 40,000 in its peak. Trust me, that must have been a crazy megalopolis back then. The city was notable for its advanced urban planning, with sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, and its impressive architecture, including the Great Bath and the Granary. Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned around 1900 BCE, and its ruins were only rediscovered in the 1920s. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an important archaeological site for the study of ancient South Asian civilization. We're heading to a teeny-tiny country that has quite an impressive history. Welcome to Malta. The Xigantia Temples are a Neolithic site located on the Mediterranean island of Gozo. They're probably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3600 to 3200 BCE. The temples consist of two megalithic structures, each with multiple rooms and altars. The name Xigantia means giant tower in Maltese, as people believe that only giants could have built such massive structures. The temples are believed to have been used for religious purposes and are considered to be an important example of prehistoric architecture. They were added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1980. Well, you must be pretty tired, but there's one more place we gotta visit today. Our plane is already landing in Armenia, and we're here to see the Temple of Garni. Look, this one is well preserved. This temple dates back to the 1st century CE. It was built by King Tiridates I as a dedication to the sun deity Mir. Sadly, the temple was destroyed in the 17th century during an earthquake, which is quite a common thing for this area, but it was later reconstructed in the 20th century. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction and is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Let's play a little guessing game. I'm going to name the sites you have on your bucket list. Machu Picchu, the Colosseum, Petra, Taj Mahal. Did I get at least one of them right? I have to confess, I was just taking them off the list of the new 7 wonders of the world. It was officially finished in 2007 after a worldwide vote. What happened to the old list? Well, it was put together in the 2nd century BCE. And there is just one site currently still standing, the Pyramids of Giza. Pack your bags. We're going to Peru, the home of the mighty Machu Picchu. When it was first discovered in 1911, its explorer thought he had managed to find the lost city of the Inca. Several decades later, it turned out it wasn't the same city. Plus, there were still 3 farmer families living there, so it couldn't be really called lost and forgotten. No wonder they like it so much there. The stones making up the buildings are cut so precisely and sit together so tightly that you can't even insert a credit card between them. It has saved the city from some serious earthquakes, which are common here. The buildings just dance through all the shaking and then go back into place. And because of the way it's arranged, you can see the sun rise or set exactly behind the important peaks on important days for the Inca. More than half, 60% of all the construction in Machu Picchu was done underground, so you can't even see it. The best part is that there are still things to be discovered if you want to get your name inked in history. Our next stop is on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The mighty Chichen Itza sits here for well over 1,500 years. The structure has exactly 365 steps. You can count when you go next time if you don't trust me. The Maya, who built the whole thing, were really into astronomy. So it's not surprising they made as many steps as there are days in a year. Also, if you happen to be here during the spring or fall equinox, you'll notice the shadows the setting sun casts make it look like there's a snake going down the stairs. The feathered serpent was one of the main deities in ancient Mexico. Chichen Itza used to be a busy urban center. It had its ups and downs. And by the time the Spanish arrived, the 16th century, it had been mostly abandoned. The first photos we have from the spot are from the end of the 19th century. Looks like the terraced pyramid had a lot more vegetation on it back in 1892. The only source of fresh water in this dry climate is the cenotes, or water-filled sinkholes. There are 4 visible cenotes, and the temple pyramid most likely stands on top of one more. Archaeologists are looking for tunnels to enter it. To see our next wonder, you must be prepared to share it with around 15,000 others. That's how many people visit the statue of Christ the Redeemer every day. The statue sits above the Corcovado mountain and weighs roughly 635 tons. Must have been tricky to lift it all the way up there. Actually, it came in parts. A French sculptor, Paul Landowski, made several pieces of the future sculpture out of clay. The head and the hands were made in full size, and the body would be made larger on the spot. The parts of the statue were cut into cubes and then cast into concrete and put together. Workers prepared the cement right on the spot and transferred all the tools by a small cogwheel railroad which tourists used to get up the hill. The statue is the best proof that lightning does strike in the same place more than once. It must be because of its position on top of the mountain, its fingers, head, and eyebrows got damaged by storms. Time to move on. This time, we're going to Agra, India. Yep, to see the Taj Mahal, that beautiful pink construction. Wait, wasn't it always white? Well, the Taj Mahal changes its color depending on what time it is. It looks pale pink or pearly gray at sunrise, crystal white at noon, and the sunset paints it orange bronze. In the evening, it may even seem translucent blue. And that's not the only optical illusion here. When you move towards the main gate, the building seems gigantic. But the closer you get to it, the smaller it looks. The minarets, or towers on both sides, might seem to be standing perfectly straight, but in reality, they're leaning outward. It's done for aesthetic balance, and also to prevent the towers from falling on the main building in case of an earthquake. For construction finished in the 17th century, the Taj Mahal looks good as new. That's because it regularly gets a spa day. They apply a proper facial mud pack to it, which is a traditional recipe to keep the radiance. I'm feeling peckish from all the traveling. How about we go to Italy and have some pasta? Just kidding. The real reason would be to see the Colosseum, of course. Its original name was the Flavian Amphitheater because it was built by the Flavian dynasty. The new name is most likely after the colossal bronze statue of Emperor Nero that was once next to the building. The model for the statue was the Colossus of Rhodes. In its nearly 2,000 years, the Colosseum has lived through at least 3 major fires and 4 earthquakes. It was damaged, repaired, and rebuilt many times. The impressive construction once hosted up to 80,000 spectators. What they watched wasn't necessarily as cruel as Hollywood made us believe. Most gladiator matches went under strict rules. Sometimes the public would get bored with the show, and the participants would draw out of the arena. Once the Colosseum stopped serving as an arena for those scary shows, it was used as a cemetery, a place of worship, for housing, workshops for artisans and merchants, the home of a religious order, and a fortified castle. Now it's open to the public, and you can check out its underground labyrinth. Are you ready for the next wonder? It's the lost city of Petra, or rather, the rediscovered city, which was once super rich and vibrant, then got abandoned and found again in 1812. The whole city is made of sandstone, and even though it's in the desert, it has seen some pretty heavy rains. Still, it has lasted 2,000 years thanks to some very skilled workers. Modern laser scanning showed that they put giant steps into the mountain to check the quality of the rock and carve out the buildings without risking their lives. And how did people survive here in the desert without any water? The Nabateans who lived here developed a whole complicated system of conduits, dams, and cisterns to make sure they have enough vital fluid for the whole year. In case you're in your Indiana Jones mode, there's still a lot to discover here in Petra. Archaeologists believe we only know 15% of the city by now, and the rest is still hidden underground. Let's finish our tour with the largest human-made project in the world. Yep, I'm talking about the Great Wall of China. It stretches for over 13,000 miles from the Bohai Sea in the east all the way to the Gobi Desert in the west. But don't trust the popular myth. You won't really see the wall from the moon. It took over 2,000 years to finish, and a good amount of building materials, mostly bricks and cut stone blocks. Have you ever scratched your name on a tree or even worse, some famous place? No worries, I won't tell anyone. People who built the wall did the same. Some of the bricks, which are mostly from the Ming Dynasty, have some data like production location, brick household name, and the responsible officials. This was a form of quality control. If something happened to any of the bricks, it would be easy to find out who to blame for it.
Fire! Fire! Everyone gets out of bed and rushes out to the street, but the whole city is ablaze. It's 1871, and the Great Fire of Chicago has just started. For 2 whole days, the Windy City, including the business district, saw nothing but ash, smoke, and flames. The fire stretched out for 4 miles, causing around $200 million in destruction. No one really knows how the Great Fire started, but some theories include a cow kicking over a lantern in a barn that quickly spread to the city. Other theories include a typical human mistake, and even a meteor shooting down from the sky, starting the massive fires. The problem was that any metropolitan area during the late 19th century was made almost entirely out of wood. Throughout history, our ancestors used wood to build shelters, ships, carts, and everyday objects, since wood was literally all over the place. Everything from cooking utensils, wheels, and tools to furniture was all wooden. Walking around town back then wouldn't feel as congested as a typical urban city today. After the Great Fire, buildings became predominantly made out of steel and concrete. China has the oldest and tallest timber building, or a skyscraper. It was built almost 1,000 years ago and is 220 feet tall, which is the equivalent of a 23-story building. It's still standing today after being restored a bunch of times. It survived around 7 major earthquakes. But just because a structure like this is still standing tall today, it doesn't mean we can go around building wooden skyscrapers out of nowhere. A lot of tall wooden structures exist today in Europe and the US, even though they were built after the steel and concrete rise. But they're just between 8 to 13 stories high, not enough to be labeled as skyscrapers. Japan plans to build a wooden skyscraper more than 1,100 feet tall, dubbed as the W350 project. They're scheduled to complete it by 2041 and turn modern cities into wooden wonderlands. The building will be made of 90% processed wood and 10% steel, and it won't be made out of regular wood. They'll use cross-laminated timber, or CLT, which is many sheets of wood glued and stuck together, creating a large plank that is even tougher than steel. But wooden structures are vulnerable to fire. Back at the time of the Great Fire of Chicago, they didn't have fireproof coatings that could be applied on the beams. Even steel structures have such coatings. And the beams of today won't be like the ones in the past. They're sturdy and big, so big that extremely high temperatures can't set them on fire. And in the case of steel, these boiling temperatures that can burn the wooden beams with the fireproof coatings will simply melt the steel structures. So either way, the problem of fire is unavoidable, and the aftermath is still the same, be it wood or steel. Every tall building sways with powerful wind. Wooden skyscrapers are no exception, and might be in more critical danger than their steel counterpart. But some engineers designed a way to avoid this problem by constructing the wooden building out of diamond and triangle shapes. A triangle by nature can have a secured base better than a rectangle. So by creating a triangle base, which would be the bottom third of the building, a wooden skyscraper can resist external forces like the wind. Plus, with such large real estate in the bottom, there would be enough place to build additional housing units or shops near the ground. Building a wooden skyscraper won't necessarily be on site. Engineers and architects will create the planning and blueprints on computers to guarantee the best possible design and structure to ensure aesthetic appearance and sturdiness. Workers can build the standardized models at a nearby factory and transport the prefabricated structures to the site. This system will save more time and have quality control from the ground up. In a concrete building, the cement has to be poured into empty beams and shapes that have to dry in days or weeks. Steel needs to be melted and molded into shapes to fit the structure and design. In the factories, the cross-laminated timber can be cut automatically and supervised by people to make sure nothing goes wrong. This will eventually save costs by not having that many construction workers. And when it's time for building, all they have to do is bring the structure in pieces, put them together, and raise it up. It won't be as messy as a regular construction site and won't take too much time. Only fixing the electrical planning, plumbing, and other internal operations will need a lot of on-site work. Then, a team for the finishing touch will come and do some last-minute brush-ups to make sure everything functions properly. And then, voila! You've got yourself a wooden skyscraper. Wood, in general, is more flexible and lighter than concrete and steel. A wooden skyscraper would withstand an earthquake better than a concrete building and would be less likely to collapse. And since wood is a natural insulator, residents can save on heating and cooling costs. Steel and concrete don't grow on trees, but wood does. And don't worry, it won't even make a dent as far as deforestation. People use less than 1% of the world's woods. Engineers and architects will have special timber farms grown for the purpose of construction. But if the world decided to turn to wood for the buildings of tomorrow, then mass deforestation would lead to extreme disasters in our forests. According to some researchers, replacing steel with wood could impact around 40% of forests annually. That still won't compensate for the new wood grown each year. Having wooden buildings around will help with carbon benefits. It requires less energy to produce than steel and concrete. According to some studies, a large building made of wood will have a much smaller carbon footprint than one made of steel and concrete, which amount to around 16% of global emissions. And since wood is lighter than steel, it'll save on fuel costs and require less to transport it, which will reduce emissions even more. Something like this will take decades to plan out and execute if people really wanted to make the switch. When people started switching to steel buildings, everyone started to notice its benefits. In the long run, wood rots and absorbs and releases moisture, which can compromise a structure. Some people have chosen recycled plastic to build new homes by turning it into rough powder and shaping it into whatever is desired. They created beams, blocks, bricks, and pillars. In South America, a group of people are already doing this by creating small two-bedroom houses made mostly out of recycled plastic. It's cheaper to make, gets rid of waste, and only takes 5 days to build, with 4 people building it. Maybe one day we'll see skyscrapers made out of recycled trash, and maybe even whole cities made out of trash. In Yemen, there's a small city known as the world's oldest metropolis. In the middle of the desert, the locals had to find a way to shelter themselves without the abundance of trees. Shibam, aka the Manhattan of the desert, is made out of fertile soil, hay, and water that were made into bricks and left to bake under the sun for days. This city was a pit stop for many travelers arriving in caravans back in the day. Most of the buildings were 7 stories high, and the ground floors were used to keep livestock and crops. The upper levels were places for socializing and looking out for any newcomers. Mud buildings are natural coolers. The mud repels heat, leaving the cool atmosphere trapped inside. The first reinforced concrete skyscraper was built in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1903. It was 16 stories high and wasn't even expected to last the whole night. People thought it would crumble from its own weight, while others believed it would topple over. When they removed the support columns, a local reporter stayed awake all night to document the building collapsing. But they were all wrong.
You're standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert in Saudi Arabia. But in the middle of that emptiness, 2 enormous mirrored skyscrapers rise side by side, in perfect parallel to each other. This isn't just some sci-fi concept, it's the Line, the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's boldest urban project yet. Now, Saudi Arabia is already home to some of the most ambitious architecture in the world, from Riyadh's King Abdullah Financial District to the iconic Abraj Al Bayt Towers in Mecca. They've been working hard for years. But the Line is in a league of its own. This project was announced in 2021, and it is part of a larger vision for the country's future called NEOM, a $500 billion mega project designed to redefine how people live, work, and interact with the environment. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, I don't know. But Nadmi Al Nasser, the longtime chief executive of the ambitious project, has recently departed. Suspicious. Even more so because NEOM's statement issued soon after did not give any plausible reason for his departure. Then, the Line project itself was originally expected to cost around $200 billion. But by 2024, that number had skyrocketed to a mind-blowing $2 trillion. That's about twice Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. And if you ask independent experts, they think it could end up costing even more. At first, the plan was to build about 10 miles of the project and have 1.5 million people living there by 2030. By now, the expectations are way more modest. Only just under 1.5 miles are likely to be done by 2030, with fewer than 300,000 residents. The project has come across a lot of problems along the way. Engineering issues and management problems have caused major delays, and progress hasn't been as fast as hoped. And now, let's figure out what exactly is the Line. It's a literal city made up of 2 parallel skyscrapers, each towering 1,640 feet high. That's higher than almost all the tallest skyscrapers in the world. These skyscrapers are 656 feet wide and stretch for a mind-boggling 106 miles across the northwest of Saudi Arabia, right near the Red Sea. The most astounding thing? The entire city is actually within this one structure. There are no cars, no roads, no emissions. But we'll go into detail a bit later. The complex is supposed to house 9 million people, and all of this running entirely on clean energy. Such a project aligns perfectly with Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan. The outside of the skyscrapers will be covered in mirrors that will reflect the surrounding desert landscape, creating an almost seamless blend between the city and its surroundings. Inside, there will be lush parks, cascading waterfalls, flying taxis, and even robot helpers to take care of everyday tasks. They're also planning to make an artificial moon as part of the city's design. One more thing that makes the Line so unique is its design. Unlike traditional cities that spread out horizontally, the Line is vertical. Everything, homes, offices, parks, schools, shopping centers, are stacked on top of each other in layers. This means that residents won't need to travel long distances to get what they need. In fact, The designers promise that all amenities will be within a 5-minute walk from anywhere in the city. And while it's compact in width, the city's vertically layered structure means it can comfortably fit all 9 million residents, while leaving plenty of room for parks, natural spaces, and modern conveniences. There's even a plan for year-round climate control, keeping both indoor and outdoor spaces at comfortable temperatures, no matter how harsh the desert weather gets. Of course, even with everything close by, people will still need to get around the city. Worry not, the line has it covered in the most futuristic way possible. It features a high-speed train system that will travel from one end of the city to the other in just 20 minutes. That's 106 miles in 20 minutes with only 4 stops along the way. Imagine being able to get anywhere in the city faster than you could drive across town in most places today. Besides the train, the line will also have autonomous vehicles. Those will be cars and shuttles driving themselves with the help of advanced technology. They will handle everything from parking to going around obstacles. Even cooler, in the line, every car, train, and any other piece of infrastructure will be connected in a huge network called the Internet of Things. Sensors and real-time data will allow traffic to flow smoothly, preventing delays and reducing congestion. They first spoke about the NEOM project in 2017. Besides the line, NEOM is supposed to include an octagon-shaped floating industrial city and a posh mountain ski resort. There, Saudi Arabia will host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. Plus, there will be the world's largest green energy plant, which will make the region self-sufficient and sustainable. The goal of NEOM is to attract people from around the world, not just to visit, but to live there. Residents will even be given their own identity, Neomians. Not everyone thinks this construction is a good idea. Some urban planners and architects have pointed out pretty big flaws in the city's straight-line layout. You see, in a regular city like Johannesburg, which covers way more ground than the line, 2 random people are usually only about 20 miles apart. But in the line, the average distance between 2 random people would be 35 miles. That's almost double, even though the line's overall area is way smaller. This setup could make it harder for people to connect socially and might be a pain to navigate, even with a high-speed train zipping through it. Now, they promise that every resident will have everything they need within a 5-minute walk, but there are doubts too. People wonder if living in a super compact, stacked-up design might end up feeling claustrophobic or even too much to handle. As for the whole mirrored exterior idea, it looks pretty cool in renderings. But there's an opinion it could actually mess with the environment. Reflecting all that sunlight in a desert might disturb local wildlife or create unexpected heat issues. The line's high-tech features sound amazing, but they come with their own set of headaches. The city is supposed to run on the Internet of Things tech and autonomous vehicles. Sounds awesome, right? But how are they going to pull that off for a 106-mile-long city? For things to run smoothly, every piece of tech, cars, trains, infrastructure, needs to be perfectly in sync, sharing tons of real-time data. If there's even a tiny glitch, it could throw a wrench into daily life for millions of people. Then there's that high-speed train. It does sound like a dream, but actually building and keeping it running in the middle of a desert is not so easy. The heat, shifting sands, and wear and tear on the tracks could cause big delays and rack up costs pretty quickly. People around the world are questioning if the line is even doable. The first inhabitants were supposed to start living there by 2030, but there are reports about scaling the project back, so that deadline feels like a big stretch. There's also a sustainability issue. The line is supposed to have 0 emissions and 100% clean energy. But building something so massive is bound to take tons of resources. With all these challenges, Saudi Arabia is looking into new ways to fund the line and figure out which parts of their Vision 2030 projects to prioritize. An insider has recently said that some projects might go ahead as planned, while others could be delayed or scaled down. This lines up with what Ali Shahabi, who's on NEOM's advisory board, has said. He admitted that the Vision 2030 goals were always meant to be super ambitious. Like, almost too ambitious. But he argued that even if they only pull off part of it in time, it'll still be a big deal.
Most of Europe's skyscrapers are concentrated in 5 cities. Those are London, Frankfurt, Paris, Moscow, and Istanbul. But even combined, all these places have fewer skyscrapers than New York City alone. For a building to be considered a modern skyscraper, it has to be about 490 feet high, which means it should have at least 40 to 50 stories. A story is simply one floor of a building with an average of 14 feet from floor to ceiling. If you had visited the U.S. just before the 1870s, you'd have found only one skyscraper. The home insurance business in Chicago was the world's first high-rise building with 10 floors. Wow! In Europe, the first skyscrapers appeared in Moscow. They were called the Seven Sisters, but they were built only in the mid-1900s. North America started to construct more and more high-rise buildings. It happened because cities were getting too populated. Every piece of land was too valuable. New York's skyline is so famous you'd probably recognize it even if you've never been to this city before. It's the same for Paris. But could you imagine the Eiffel Tower surrounded or even blocked by skyscrapers? It would surely lose some of its magic. La Défense district is where you'll find skyscrapers in Paris. This way, they don't interfere with the romantic and touristic scenery of the city. In London, things are done a bit differently. Some of its skyscrapers have unusual shapes. One of such constructions is the Gherkin. If you get stuck in this building, you'd really be in a pickle. Another interestingly shaped skyscraper is the Shard. There's one more nicknamed the Cheese Grater. These are not their official names, of course, but they do make sense if you look at the shape of these buildings. But it's not some random architectural concept. The reason the skyscrapers are shaped like this is not to obscure St. Paul's Cathedral. By the way, the top of this monumental construction is visible even from King Henry VIII's mound, and that's a great distance away. Anyway, there are also other sites, like the Tower of London and the Palace of Westminster. They have their own viewpoints. So, not to ruin London's skyline, it's not allowed to build anything that would block these monuments. Most European cities already existed when the US started to build its first skyscrapers. That's why they didn't have much space to fit in giant buildings. Evenly zoned cities were the result of their steady growth throughout the years. For example, in Lisbon, there's a viewpoint in Eduardo VII Park. From that point, you can see all the park and the river. If suddenly there was a bunch of 490-foot-tall buildings standing around, this gorgeous view would be totally ruined. You wouldn't see the iconic avenue, and forget the river. Instead, there are buildings. Like Lisbon, many other cities in Europe don't want skyscrapers to spoil their cultural heritage. Take Germany. Most of their skyscrapers are in Frankfurt. In other cities, they'd rather protect and restore the buildings that are already standing. And even if, let's say, Berlin wanted to home some skyscrapers, it wouldn't be able to do it in any case. Its soil just wouldn't allow it. Put a skyscraper there and it'll sink. Constructing a foundation for a very tall building in Berlin would mean investing a lot of money. The soil's too sandy and soft. But what if you ignored all the cultural heritage and still decided to fill a European city like Prague with skyscrapers? First, you'd have to demolish a lot of what already exists there. This would lead to an angry crowd of people complaining that the city they know and love is gone. Brussels has experienced this to a certain extent. There's even a term for this phenomenon: Brusselization. Simply put, it means not caring where you place new high-rise buildings. Here is fine. Oh, sprout one over there too. Hey, we could call them Brussels sprouts. Or not. But in most cases, city authorities don't want new constructions to change the historical appearance of the place. Some large European cities might even follow France's example and choose a separate district, a place just for skyscrapers. The Burj Khalifa, which is more than 2,700 feet high, is the tallest building in the world. It wasn't an easy feat to construct it. The skyscraper took 6 years to build, and folks say it was worth the effort. The construction is so tall, you can see it from 60 miles away on a clear day. The tallest building in Europe is only half that size. The Lotte Center in St. Petersburg is a bit more than 1,500 feet tall. Well, the question is, if skyscrapers are so tall, why don't they get knocked over by wind? Their structure, from the very foundation to the highest point of the building, is the answer. Take the Burj Khalifa, please. The soil where the skyscraper is built isn't ideal. So, beneath the 110,000-ton concrete foundation of this massive construction, there are 192 piles driven to a depth of more than 160 feet. Thanks to the friction between the concrete and soil, these piles don't move at all, creating a solid foundation. But most skyscrapers are built on bedrock because it barely shifts. Their frames are made of steel. If you looked at a skyscraper without its external structure, all you'd see would be a bunch of steel beams. The taller the building, the more the winds affect it. Taming them is one of the biggest challenges skyscrapers have to tackle. Imagine you're on one of the top floors of a skyscraper. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind hits the building. The entire construction starts wobbling, and you can feel it even inside. You might even get knocked over if you don't grab onto something. To avoid such a situation, most skyscrapers have a pendulum-like structure inside. It absorbs some of the wind's force. This thing is called a tuned mass damper. The mechanism acts as a counterweight. When the skyscraper gets hit by the wind, it's the tuned mass damper that moves instead of the building. Some high-rise constructions don't need this pendulum. The Shard, for example, deals with the wind with the help of its tapered shape, and Shanghai Tower uses its 120-degree twist. Both skyscrapers have incredibly smart structures. That's why they don't get too wobbly when the wind hits them. The Shard doesn't have a tuned mass damper whatsoever, and the one in Shanghai Tower only serves as a tourist attraction. Before a building's design is finalized, it normally undergoes a wind tunnel test. A model city is built and tested with this new super tall addition. When the experts turn the wind on, it simulates real-life conditions. Let's say the model skyscraper breaks under the wind's pressure during the test. Then the chances are it's going to tumble over in real life too. Winds up there can be so strong that things like wind turbines have become a thing. The Bahrain World Center has 3 of them right in the middle of the building. But there are some others. Strata SE1, for example, has wind turbines at the top. There's a phenomenon called the downdraft effect. It's accelerated winds near the skyscraper. When a powerful gust of wind hits a high-rise building, it gets pushed upward around the sides of the construction and down toward the street. That's why if you're passing by a particularly tall building on a windy day, you might have to force your way around. But let's say several square-cornered skyscrapers are built next to each other. Then they're likely to channel the wind through the streets. This can create many hurricanes on especially windy days. A study once examined 100 tallest buildings that were about to be dismantled by their owners. It turned out most of them had an average lifespan of a mere 42 years, but some of them can last much longer. For example, the Temple Court building is still standing to this day. At 150 feet, it's a bit smaller than others, but it's already seen 100 winters throughout its life. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you think of getting rid of a building is dust, debris, and deafening noise. But things aren't quite as dramatic as that for most skyscrapers. When you want it gone, you take it apart, bit by bit. This process starts from the top and goes all the way down to the bottom. Voila! The building is slowly disappearing in front of your eyes. Abracadabra. Ah, the desert welcomes you with challenging conditions of abandoned environments and extreme temperatures. Hey, some of us would prefer dessert, chocolate over sand and rocks. Oh well. Just like cactuses and camels, buildings have had to adapt to these conditions. Here are some examples of astonishing structures in deserts. These structures are called earthships. They're located in a New Mexico desert town. A large community of like-minded people lives in them. What's even more interesting is that the location of these buildings is registered as dumpsters. Maybe it's because all these structures are made out of old tires, bottles, and cans. Earthships operate using green building principles. About 40% of a typical earthship is built with natural or recycled materials. Imagine the walls made up of hundreds of used tires packed with dirt. Then there are layers of floor-to-ceiling passive solar windows. They gather the sunlight during winter and reflect it in the summer to keep the structures at a reasonable room temperature. You can see plants in corridors and glass bottles or aluminum cans stuffed inside walls. Certainly a distinct house in many ways. Mike Reynolds is an architect who noticed the alarming waste and consumption levels in the 1970s. He designed a fully sustainable home out of cans back then. Almost 40 years later, he becomes the one who brings together all the other earthshippers. Reynolds drove a Mercedes, but it ran off of the vegetable oil he picked up at fast food restaurants in town. A standard 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom earthship costs about $250,000 in this town. Yet there are Earthships like Dobson House that can cost as much as $1.5 million. If you do it yourself, with family and friends, you can eliminate the cost of labor, and it becomes relatively less expensive. Let's assume you're really going to build one. Where can it be? Well, anywhere. Earthships currently fit in the cold, dry air of Canada, as well as the hot and humid climate of Haiti. This is the Mirage Mirror House. It's an installation set in the Southern California desert. Mirage opened in 2017 as part of a contemporary art exhibition. It's composed of mirrors. This minimalistic structure blends with the environment around it. The doors, windows, and openings have been removed to create an amazing experience. What you have in the landscape is reflected back to you. How's it made? With mirrored surfaces. At night, the distant lights refract from the mirrors. In the daytime, the sky is transformed into banks of clouds. There's no fixed scenery in this house. How about seeing a futuristic structure in the deep desert? Architects designed a concept home that pairs perfectly with Elon Musk's Cybertruck. The house has a post-apocalyptic theme. When I say post-apocalyptic, it's because I can't say it. Anyway, the house is designed to survive in a disaster scenario. The cyber house has steel gates, the windows are armored, and the exterior walls are made out of super strong material. Modern house is controlled by an autonomous geothermal heat pump. To put it in less sci-fi terms, you can keep the internal temperature steady. This sleek house has an entrance that can fit the Cybertruck. After all, it's inspired by it in the first place. Plus, the Cybertruck can be lifted to the second floor to be more secure. This is King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Saudi Arabia. Basically, it's a laboratory in a desert. It was designed to demand minimum energy. The architecture has patterns on the walls and ceilings, giving reference to the local tradition of geometric form. The next stop is Swartberg House in South Africa. This one is located near the Swartberg Mountains, but don't get too excited. It's on the edge of the Great Karoo Desert. It's a 4-bedroom apartment. It has a special temperature regulating system. The system works like a shield from the heat in the summer and as a sun trap in the winter. You're looking at the Grand Mosque of Djenné in Mali. This mosque is 52 feet tall. This is impressive because it's made of only sticks and a special mix of mud and other natural elements found in the desert. Petra is an ancient city hidden in the Jordan Desert. The structures are carved directly into red, white, and pink-colored sandstone cliff faces. It's located among the canyons and mountains near the desert. The place was a trade center many years ago. You might already see pictures of the impressive facade of the treasury. This structure still holds many mysteries in it. For starters, scientists can't explain how the Nabateans managed to create such a structure thousands of years ago. Did you know that there's another mysterious place in the middle of the desert that has a similar structure to Petra? Median Saleh was like a second capital of the Nabatean kingdom. Yet another secret they left for us to decipher. It has over 100 decorated tombs and more than 1,000 non-monumental graves. Plus, inscriptions and cave drawings are also here, again surrounded by sandstone. This wooden shack was a post office once. The structure is in the Tengger Desert of Mongolia. It's surrounded by nothing. Sand is the only thing that accompanies the lonely structure. The building is only 23 square inches. As you can guess, it didn't get too many visitors. It was abandoned for over 35 years. Its fate changed one day when a woman discovered the building. Mrs. Yang and her friend came up with an idea. They were going to reach businesses and people who wanted to send letters and postcards from the world's loneliest post office without actually visiting the place. It worked. The post office rarely gets visitors in place, but it's busy online. Over 20,000 letters and postcards were sent from the Desert Post Office in December 2021 alone. The place is about 6 miles off the nearest road. A post truck picks the letters up and hits the road for delivery. Eventually, they are shipped all over the world. A second destination in Saudi Arabia is King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture. The building has an interesting design. It took nearly a decade to build this complex structure. It's a 321-foot-tall tower which stands out with its look. Stone Matters Pavilion is a stone structure in Palestine. The structure spans a surface area of 93 square inches. It has been built entirely out of 300 interlocking stones that mutually support each other. The concave roofs, and yes, they look like giant bowls, are designed that way to collect rainwater. The structure is in Iran. Interestingly, in Iran, the evaporation rate is 3 times faster than the world average, so this bowl-like design comes in very handy. It captures the water in a way that the water can form a single mass as a whole before it evaporates. The outer shell of the roof system collects rainwater, but it also works as an additional shading. It makes air move freely, designed like a cooling mechanism for both roofs. Eco Lodge in Egypt is the next stop. The project is built in a place that overlooks the desert and is constructed using locally available materials like sun-fired bricks and palm wood. The building is an example of traditional architecture. There's a water basin that lets in the air to keep the interior cool. A worthy mention is the CID Interpretation Center in Chile. Chile's Atacama Desert is among the top tourist destinations in the country. To help the tourists, architects designed a visitors center as part of the infrastructure for the wind farm. Here, the cold winter months don't freeze people because the large windows make the most of solar heating. What's even more interesting is that the building is designed to go completely dark at night. Imagine you somehow bumped into the building by accident. Black Desert House is a building respecting the stars. At night, this house goes completely dark. It dissolves into the night, so the stars can appear more prominent. Now, any mysterious desert buildings you know that aren't on this list? Let us know in the comments.
I bet you've never heard of the legendary oasis of Zerzura. This ancient city is said to be hidden somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and its discovery could mean unimaginable riches and untold secrets. According to an anonymous 15th century Arabic guide, the key to unlocking the city lies in the beak of a bird carved on the city gate. Zerzura might not be as popular as Machu Picchu or the pyramids, but that just makes it more mysterious. Legend has it that Zerzura is built around this big oasis somewhere in the desert west of the Nile. Apparently, it's made out of white stone and has all these luxurious houses and gold decorations. The story goes that a scribe wrote down the account of a traveler who stumbled upon Zerzura while looking for his lost camel. At one point in his journey, the man got caught up in a sandstorm, where he got separated from the rest of his group. The traveler kept wandering in the desert for days, and then, out of nowhere, 2 men showed up and guided him to the city of Zerzura. The traveler described this city as an oasis filled with little birds and made out of pure white stonework. The city is also said to be guarded by giants. In 1835, an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson mentioned the city in one of his books. He spoke to a man from Egypt who found the city by accident after days of wandering through the desert. He mentioned some ruins, unusual stonework, and a large oasis surrounded by palm trees. The man even gave some instructions on how the city could be found, indicating that it might be in the western desert of Egypt. But here's the kicker. Even though a group of explorers went out to find Zerzura, they didn't succeed. At the same time, they did stumble upon a bunch of previously unknown oases. In the early 1900s, numerous expeditions were sent to find the city, including one with a fleet of Ford Model A trucks. But, alas, none were successful. Others say Zerzura did exist at one point, but not anymore. It's possible it was swallowed by the desert. It's believed that back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually green. Scientists even found traces of ancient rivers that flowed through the area 100,000 years ago, creating green corridors across the desert. But Zerzura might have never been real to begin with. Maybe it only existed in the minds of people, a figment of their imagination as they were struggling in the African desert. For thousands of years, people have been obsessed with the hunt for another lost city, Atlantis. But if this place really existed, where on Earth, or under the sea, could it be? According to Plato, Atlantis was an actual place. and it was supposedly located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Strait of Gibraltar. But how did this mythical city become synonymous with a perfect, paradise-like society? Well, you can thank Ignatius Donnelly for that. The American writer published a book in 1882 where he outlined 13 hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Donnelly truly believed that this lost city was where ancient humans lived in peace and joy for centuries. Donnelly even thought that Atlantis was the original source of many ancient civilizations around the world. And if we just followed Plato's clues, we could totally find Atlantis. Sounds like a treasure hunt, right? What inspired Donnelly to go on this quest in the first place, you might ask? Apparently, an amateur archaeologist discovered the city of Troy, using Homer's The Iliad as a guide. Well, if Troy was real, then why not Atlantis? Back in the day, some people believed that America was the legendary Atlantis. Columbus really stirred up some excitement when he brought back news about the New World to Europe. But the real hunt for Atlantis didn't really start until the 20th and 21st centuries. Some people tried to connect the dots between a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini and the destruction of Minoan settlements. But in 2018, a team of investigators claimed they had nailed it, announcing they had discovered concrete proof that Atlantis had existed. What was their evidence, you ask? A series of mysterious circles in a national park in Spain. But the circles turned out to be nothing more than experimental ponds for studying zooplankton. Let's face it, there's no real evidence that Plato's lost city of Atlantis actually existed. But it doesn't make searching for it any less exciting, does it? The Fountain of Youth isn't a lost city per se, but it is another mythical location that many have claimed to have stumbled upon over the years. Long ago, people were obsessed with the idea of living forever, or at least extending their lives as much as possible. Each culture had its own wild story, like the Greeks talking about a magic fountain that let people live longer, or Alexander the Great finding a river of paradise that could heal the wounded. Japanese legends spoke of hot springs that could make you young again, while the Caribbean locals talked about the restorative powers of the water in one of their own mystical lands. Explorers searched far and wide for these magical waters, but nothing. Probably the most famous of all was the story of the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who thought he'd found it in Florida. Now, Ponce de Leon was quite a character. He sailed with Columbus and became an important figure in the area now known as the Dominican Republic. He found gold in Puerto Rico and even became the island's administrator. But when the ruler of Spain decided to replace him in his duties, he got upset and decided to explore Florida, looking for gold and the elusive Fountain of Youth. He explored the Bahamas, but sadly, he didn't find any gold or magic water. He did, however, make his way to Florida. He explored the coast and even discovered the Gulf Stream. Unfortunately, his last expedition didn't go well, and he was wounded. But the legend of him searching for the Fountain of Youth lived on. Even though historians don't think he was really looking for the Fountain of Youth, thousands of people visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park every year to try the sulfur-smelling water. It's the oldest attraction in Florida, which has been around since the 17th century. Some say the water has unusual properties, but I'll leave that up to you to decide after you visit this place. Norse mythology has its own mysterious land called Thule. It's said to be somewhere between Scandinavia and Iceland, where the sun barely shines and the cold bites hard. The folks there survive on a diet of millet, herbs, fruits, and roots, washed down with a grain and honey brew. As for its exact location, scholars can't seem to agree on it to this day. The legendary ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was said to be the first to stumble upon Thule during his quest for tin mines. He sailed his way up north, passing by Scotland, and after 6 long days of sailing, he reached Thule. The people there, according to Pytheas, were quite primitive. But that's no surprise, since they were just simple farmers living off the land. They showed Pytheas where the sun set on the shortest day of the year. They also told him that in winter, the sun never rose at all, and in summer, there was no night. For many years, historians have been debating the true identity of this mythical land of Thule. Some say it's Iceland, while others claim it's Norway. A little bit of progress has been made recently with the help of a team of researchers. If their findings are correct, Thule might be the elusive island of Smola. That's farther south than any of the Norwegian islands that were on the list of contenders. It may be too soon to celebrate, but it does look like Thule has finally been found. You've just reached your perfect spot on a deserted beach. It's so quiet here that you start to doze off. But as you open your eyes, you are shocked. Wait a minute, is that an actual house that's just been washed up on the shore? It may sound like the beginning of a sci-fi novel, but not if you live near this beach in El Salvador. There's a mysteriously abandoned house there that looks as if it's just been washed ashore. How did this villa end up there? How long has it been here without anyone noticing it? This mysterious construction is 46 miles south of El Salvador's capital, San Salvador. Locals say the building used to be a hotel called Puerto Ventura. At the time it was built, its main attraction was the fact that it was really close to the sea. Unfortunately, the engineering behind it wasn't well planned out, all because locals didn't need any official permission to start the construction. The hotel was too close to the water and dangerously exposed to the elements. The Roman-style villa is now a mere 50 feet from the edge of the sea when the tide is low. It can only be accessed in the morning because later, the tides fill the first floor with salt water. What's now left of the hotel looks like the ruins of a two-story house. The front part is very impressive, with Roman-type pillars. It also has wide windows on the second floor. You can still see parts of the iron structures and remains of what used to be the gateway to the second floor. There are some bleachers at the top of the building. They're sometimes used by tourists. More and more people are now browsing the area, taking photos, even though the building is obviously not safe for climbing. There's little information on how long it's been sitting in its current location, but some locals say it's been there for at least 20 years. It had remained a local secret for years before it was discovered by a TikTok user in 2021. But that doesn't answer the question, how did the hotel end up in another location altogether? This is where things become a little fuzzy. While some locals say that the building was abandoned decades ago, others claim it was deserted after Hurricane Mitch hit the area back in 1998. Hurricane Mitch was one of the most dangerous weather phenomena to ever hit Central America. During the storm, the winds traveled at 178 miles per hour, and the hurricane itself lasted for about 15 hours. It was also the cause of a huge amount of rainfall, which resulted in floods and many dangerous landslides. Being built so close to the shoreline, the former hotel had little chance of surviving the extreme weather conditions, so it must have been literally displaced. After sitting under the sun, you might start dreaming of some snowballs getting washed ashore. To even out the temperature. I'm not kidding. This strange natural phenomenon did happen back in 2016. It resulted in about 11 miles of the coast of the Gulf of Aab in West Siberia getting covered with huge snowballs. Because of the low temperatures, small pieces of ice started to form in the water. Afterward, the wind and waves rolled them into giant snowballs. Some of them were the size of a tennis ball, but others were up to 3 feet wide. A 2004 Harley-Davidson night train motorcycle popped up ashore on a British Columbia beach back in 2012. It was neatly packed inside a shipping container. It took some time to do it, but the owner was eventually traced down. His name was Ikuyo Yokoyama, and he lost his motorcycle after a tsunami struck Japan on March 11, 2011. To get to its final destination, the Harley-Davidson traveled more than 4,000 miles. To celebrate its long journey, Yokoyama donated the bike to the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee. It's been on display there ever since, in case you want to visit. This strange phenomenon made it look as if someone spilled dish soap all over the beach. But it does happen pretty often in Queensland. Sea foam covers the shore there a couple of times each year. It mostly happens after a storm, when ocean waves move dissolved organic matter around. It's basically like a giant ice cream maker. After Cyclone Debbie back in March of 2017, some beaches actually needed to be closed because of huge amounts of white foam. The wind even brought some of that foam to the nearby towns, making locals believe it was snowing. Would you be surprised to see a 6 by 6 foot rusty metal die washed ashore on your local beach? Because back in 2017, people in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho sure were. It turned out to be an old storage tank. Someone decided to spice it up a bit by adding some white spots to make it look like a die. In 1992, thousands of rubber duckies got stranded at sea after a large container ship that was transporting them was hit by a wave. As you can imagine, the ducks started popping up all over the world, in Hawaii, Alaska, South America, Australia, in Europe, and even in the Arctic. It's estimated that a couple hundred of those unlucky rubber ducks are still out there. Interestingly, they turned out to be very useful to scientists. Based on their movements, researchers can monitor the direction of water currents. If you happen to like dinosaurs, you'll be happy to know sea waters can also bring ashore some fossils. In 2018, a large dinosaur jawbone ended up on the coast of Lilstock Beach in Somerset, England. It used to belong to a dinosaur called Ichthyosaurus. Thanks to this finding, scientists were able to make an impressive discovery. Before, they thought the Ichthyosaurus could reach a maximum length of about 69 feet. But after they studied the jawbone, they ended up recalculating the creature's size. They concluded that the Ichthyosaurus could grow up to 85 feet. The megalodon was the largest predator in our planet's history. It lived almost all over the globe, except near the poles. How do we know that? Because megalodon teeth keep appearing on beaches every now and then. One staggering megalodon tooth, which was way over 20 inches long, was discovered in a river in Croatia. Since these creatures have been extinct for about 3 million years, their teeth are highly prized by fossil hunters. A giant Lego man that washed ashore is something I never thought I'd hear about. And it turns out it didn't happen just once. There were 4 of these giant Lego men in total, each around 8 feet tall. One was found in England and one in the Netherlands, while the other 2 popped up in Florida and California. It was surely not a coincidence, and after some research, people found out that a Dutch artist was behind this. Ego Leonard started this project as a personal statement campaign. A short film was even made about this, and it was called No Real Than You Are. This sentence was written on each of the 4 Lego men put to sea. A bundle of over 50 letters was washed ashore in New Jersey on a beach in Atlantic Highlands back in 2012. It happened shortly after Hurricane Sandy had struck the area. A 14-year-old boy found the letters and gave them to his mom. She was so touched by them that she decided to carefully dry and return them to their owner. The letters were the correspondence of 2 people named Dorothy and Lynn. They were dated between 1942 and 1948. The last was written a week before their wedding. With the help of an online genealogy site, the woman reached Dorothy and returned the letters to the 88-year-old woman who was living in a retirement home. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to walk on diamonds, head straight to the town of Nördlingen in Germany. It seems like a typical fairy tale village with cute houses and red roofs, but its walls and streets are actually studded with over 72,000 diamonds. You'll need a microscope to see them, but they're definitely there. When the first people came to live here, somewhere around the 9th century CE, they were positive they were settling down in a volcanic crater. They didn't know the stone they were using for construction was embedded with millions of tiny diamonds, and the origins of the crater were out of this world. An asteroid slightly larger than half a mile in diameter hit our planet around 14.5 million years ago in what is now Bavaria and left a crater 16 miles wide. The bedrock was under such intense heat and pressure that the bubbles of carbon inside transformed into tiny diamonds at a concentration like nowhere else in the world. The locals didn't pay attention to their houses, built of what was left of that asteroid impact, shimmering on sunrise. Then, in the 1960s, 2 geologists arrived from the USA, studied the landscape from a distance, and noticed it didn't look exactly like a volcanic crater. After further research, they realized their theory that the crater was shaped from above and not from below proved right. They even had to change school books after the discovery, not to mislead the students. Once the word of the crater had spread, NASA got interested in it and sent their Apollo 14 and Apollo 16 astronauts to visit it to learn about what kind of rocks they'd find in space and which of them were worth bringing home. A moon rock that arrived with one of the missions is now on display at the local museum, and astronauts still visit the place. The locals, though, are so used to living among diamonds, they don't even find it special. The Australian town of Coober Pedy is known as the opal capital of the world and exists completely underground. The town even has the first 4-star underground hotel in the world. The reason people settled in this area was to work at an opal mine. Back in the day, the miners could hardly survive under the burning desert sun, so someone decided to put a tent directly into the mine. Then it turned into a home. Now, Coober Pedy has around 2,500 residents from different countries, about 30 shops, an opal gallery, museums, a bar, and other buildings, and is a popular tourist attraction. The town of Monowi, Nebraska, in the USA, has a mayor, a clerk, a treasurer, a librarian, a tavern keeper, and a bartender. Yet, the population is officially just 1. Elsie Eiler has been doing all those jobs, paying taxes to herself, and voting herself for mayor since 2004. Back in the 1930s, Monowi had a population of 150 people, grocery shops, and restaurants. When farming conditions got worse, people started leaving family by family until it went down to 1 person. If you feel like saving some money on house construction, look up some property in the Spanish town of Centenil de las Bodegas. 3,000 residents live under and into the sides of the Cadiz Mountains and use them as natural walls and ceilings. The first settlers moved in here back in prehistoric times. The rocks keep the houses cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Neft Dashleri in Azerbaijan was built as an oil platform in 1940, directly in the Caspian Sea. Once they discovered rich oil deposits, it started growing and is now made up of a network of platforms with around 5,000 people working and living here. The town has apartments, bridges, a library, a community center, and even a movie theater. The Japanese village of Nagoro has an unofficial second name, the Scarecrow Village. The last children were born here over 20 years ago. It officially has less than 50 residents, but it feels complete thanks to 350 life-size human dolls. When a local lady came back here in 2000 to look after her aging father, she saw the empty streets, shops, and schools. To change that, she and her friends started making cute dolls to replace the residents. The entire town of Whittier, Alaska, lives under one roof of a 14-story building of a former barracks. That's around 220 people who live here all year round, plus all the shops, a police station, a post office, a hospital, and a church. The locals are mostly working in commercial fishing, recreation, and tourism, or for the state ferry and railroad. The idea behind having everyone and everything in one place is to save money on heating in the always cold climate and let the people do all their business inside. This way, they don't have to face the unbearably strong winds. There's a town in Svalbard, Norway called Longyearbyen, where the sun sets on October 25th and doesn't rise again for the next 4 months. When it rises again in spring, the locals gather on the step of an old hospital at 12:15 to welcome the sun and celebrate its return. Then, it doesn't set for over 4 months. It happens because of the way the Earth is tilted on its axis. The sun only rises and sets once each year at the North and South Poles. Longyearbyen is the northernmost town in the world, so it gets affected by that. Its residents occasionally see polar bears and reindeer in the streets and get around on snowmobiles. The Italian village of Viganella was built right at the bottom of a deep valley and on the wrong side of the mountains. They cast huge shadows and deprived the village of the sun for the entire winter. The locals used to live like that for centuries, until one engineer decided to build a large mirror high on the opposite slope of the mountain. It's operated by a computer and reflects light on the central square of Viganella for at least 6 hours a day during the darkest months. Santa Cruz del Islote in Colombia is one of the world's most crowded islands, with around 600 residents in a 2.5-acre area. Fishermen built this island on a coral platform over a century ago. They chose it because of its beautiful location and the absence of mosquitoes. The families of the original settlers were growing, and most of them never left the island. You'll only find people with 6 different last names living here. When the family needs extra space, they just add an extra floor to one of around 100 homes in town. Now it has a school, shops, a church, and 1 restaurant. There is no traffic, since the streets aren't wide enough for cars or trucks, and the distances are perfectly walkable. No one on the island locks their doors, because everyone knows each other, and there hasn't been a single crime. Another place where people don't lock their doors is the Shani Shingnapur village in India. In fact, local homes and even shops don't have front doors, keys, and locks, but locals never feel unsafe. Residents believe their village is under the protection of Lord Shani, who will punish anyone who tries to steal something. A legend says that around 300 years ago, after heavy rain and flooding, the locals found a huge rock. The same night, Lord Shani appeared in the dreams of the village head and promised to protect the village if they kept the rock and the village unsheltered. The deity would live on the rock and oversee the village. Once the first bank opened in the village, they added a glass entrance and a barely visible electromagnetic lock with a remote control to respect the tradition. If you're looking for the most relaxed place in the world, check out the Villages in Florida. You can't move here unless there is at least one person over 55 in your home. And you'd have to leave behind any family members under 19. The most popular means of transportation in the Villages is a golf cart. There are all sorts of free fun activities for the residents, so it's far from boring. It was April 10th, 1912. Richard had just departed from Southampton, England, aboard the most famous ship of the time, dubbed the Unsinkable. Since he had just witnessed a near collision with the SS City of New York, he decided to write to his wife and report the unfortunate and frightening event. "My dearest Sal," he wrote, "we got away yesterday after a lot of trouble." Little did he know that a mere 4 days later, both his pen and the ship he was on would be lost forever at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Was this some sort of bad omen? Did Richard actually foresee what was about to happen to the ship he was on? In case you haven't figured it out by now, Mr. Richard Geddes was aboard the Titanic on the day that he wrote the letter to his wife. On April 14th, 1912, the ship seemed to have been lost forever. Along with it, so many secrets and treasures have settled at the bottom of the ocean. It took until 1985 for the Titanic's wreck to be finally rediscovered using state-of-the-art sonar technology. Ever since then, they've managed to recover thousands of items from the Titanic, and many of them went on display or auction. Things like jewelry, a life jacket, a menu from the ship's restaurant, or even a sample square of carpet from the first-class stateroom have all captivated the public's attention, just like the many stories of the people on board. Scientists have even tried to come up with strategies to get the Titanic back up altogether to properly study it and stop it from getting more and more damaged at the bottom of the ocean. Some have suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls to make it float, while others even considered injecting it with 180,000 tons of Vaseline. Another idea was to use 450,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to trap it in an iceberg that would float to the surface. But they eventually had to let go of all these potential strategies, since the Titanic is way too fragile to ever be recovered. The Titanic may be one of the most interesting ships lying at the bottom of the ocean, at least in popular culture, but deep-sea divers have a lot of other stories to share. Planes also sometimes find their way to the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea divers in Oahu, Hawaii, came across the wreckage of an F-4U Corsair plane. It seems to have crashed into the ocean in 1946, as it didn't have sufficient fuel. If you can dive deep enough, you might even stumble upon statues and lost artifacts, like those found in the world's only underwater archaeological park off the coast of Naples, Italy. It features the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Baia. The underwater statues found here are breathtaking, to say the least. In an ironic twist of events, some of the equipment we intended to use to get us to the moon was lost at the bottom of the sea for a very long time. But how did that happen? Beginning from the late 1960s and ending in the early 70s, many Apollo rockets were launched to orbit the Earth and the Moon. When reaching altitudes of about 38 miles, the first portion of the spacecraft, including the engines, needed to separate. People thought these components got destroyed or lost forever. But were they really? In 2012, a team of specialists discovered a bunch of rocket engines 14,000 feet off the coast of Florida. They have since gone through a 2-year renovation plan and are now on display at Seattle's Museum of Flight. Can you imagine stumbling upon a whole city underwater? Back in 2001, a lost city was discovered in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Some archaeologists believe it to be the oldest city in history. By comparison, it's almost the size of Manhattan and features massive walls and even plazas. They stumbled upon pieces of sculpture, artwork, and even what looked like ancient wooden furniture, believed to date back up to 9,500 years ago and 5,000 years older than any city previously discovered. Okay, how about an underwater river? I can't even imagine what that would look like, but some deep divers claim to have seen it south of Tulum, Mexico. Is that even possible? Well, not really, since the Cenote Angelita Cave is not a true river, but a very special type of optical illusion. It's formed by a halocline, meaning a cloud of hydrogen sulfide at the bottom of this underwater cave. Turns out you can actually swim right through this cloud, which makes you feel like you're swimming through a flowing body of water. Not all things discovered underwater are inanimate objects. Some of them are actually quite scary sea creatures. A jellyfish might not be on your list of things to look out for if you can avoid the stings. But this giant one, also known as a lion's mane jellyfish, is the largest known species of its kind. In all fairness, you'll only uncover it if you happen to dive into the waters of the Arctic, Northern Atlantic, and Northern Pacific Oceans. You surely won't miss it, since it stretches across 120 feet from the top to the bottom of its tentacles. When it comes to deep-sea diving, a lot of people are looking to discover some lost treasure. One diver was lucky enough to have hit the literal jackpot when he came upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure on the bottom of the seabed. That was back in 2015, when this lucky diver was swimming just off the coast of Florida. What did he find, you might ask? Well, about 51 gold coins, 40 feet of gold chain, and a rare single coin that was tailored for the King of Spain, Philip V. Speaking of people looking for lost treasures, divers also sometimes found pirate ships. They discovered one of these pirate shipwrecks in 2015 off the coast of Colombia. It dates back to the 18th century. The value of this forgotten ship was estimated to be between $4 billion and $17 billion, as it contained treasures, precious stones, gold, and countless other really valuable items. By comparison, a whole island in the Bahamas is up for grabs at $75 million. A computer is the last thing you'd ever expect to discover underwater, right? And this was no regular computer, but an ancient one. And yet, someone stumbled upon it between 1900 and 1901 on the spot of a shipwreck located off one Greek island. Researchers believe this weird stone contraption to be the earliest form of a computer. It was designed to serve many purposes, such as predicting astronomical positions and eclipses on the calendar. Since humanity lost most of the technology used back then, it was wonderful to rediscover it so many years later. It let us piece together many of the ancient Greeks' accomplishments. The computer is now at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, should you ever want to check it out in person. This has to be one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest part of the Earth's oceans. We really don't know how deep it is, since it's so difficult to measure. But it's somewhere around 7 miles deep, and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. They first studied this massive underwater hole back in 1875 using a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director named James Cameron reached the bottom of the trench in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet call this place their home, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench took its name after the nearby Mariana Islands, which are named Las Marianas in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria.
So, you've just finished your sightseeing tour of Edinburgh, Scotland, or Scotland. It lasted just under an hour, and you're hungry for more. You ask your guide if there's anything else to see, and they start talking about a mysterious underground city. You ask how long it takes to get there, and you're shocked by the guide's answer. You're standing on it. It's right under your feet. South Bridge? But you were just there and didn't notice a giant arrow pointing down. So this is where the mystery starts. The story begins in the mid-1700s. The Scottish capital wasn't as big as it is today. Only 60,000 people lived around Edinburgh Castle. All of them were packed inside medieval walls, and they say today's cities are overpopulated. Get a load of the living conditions back then. The buildings were tall, so there was little natural light. Some houses had 14 stories. Cows walked the narrow winding streets and left stuff. Things were so bad that the famous English writer Daniel Defoe noted, "I believe that in no city in the world so many people have so little room." Yep, that's the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe. Well, something just had to be done. The solution was to build 2 long bridges to the north and to the south of the city. The names they gave the bridges were more descriptive than colorful. The bridge to the north was completed first. In 1785, construction on the second bridge got underway. It was going to connect the main pedestrian street in the north with the university buildings in the south of Edinburgh. But don't think of this construction as a modern bridge over a river. It was more of a viaduct, a type of bridge that connects 2 hills across a valley. The word viaduct comes from Latin, as Romans were pioneers in building these structures. Their capital was built on 7 hills. And just to be copycats, Edinburgh also straddled 7 major hills. Only 2 are visible today because the city has been built up. Now, back in the 18th century, the construction of the South Bridge was a remarkable feat of engineering. It took the builders only 3 years to complete it. 19 stone arches spanned a chasm that was 31 feet at its deepest point, and the length over 1,000 feet. Impressive, even for today's standards. But what does a 2.5 centuries old viaduct have to do with an underground city? Well, it is the city. You see, they designed Southbridge to be hollow on the inside. As you walk along this street today, there is actually a huge human-made cave beneath your feet. The popular name for this set of chambers is the Edinburgh Vaults. But what was the purpose of this space? And is there something or someone there now? Well, let's take it one step at a time. The builder's original intention was for these vaults to serve as merchant shops. At first, it worked out fine. Merchants used a total of 120 vaults as shops and warehouses. There were workshops, cobblers, and taverns. But as time went by, a major design flaw came to light. The stone was leaking, and the vaults were damp all the time. There was even flooding. The builders forgot to waterproof the structure. The merchants feared the water would damage their precious goods. After just a couple of years, the first tenants started moving out. Once legal trade moved away from the vaults, the city's poor moved in. And not only them, but all sorts of shady characters. Historians don't know much about this period, since there are no written records. But even the squatters had to leave soon. If you couldn't do business in these vaults, how could you live in them? It was damp and cold, and there was no ventilation, sanitation, or natural light. It really stunk. Every real estate agent's worst nightmare. Just 30 years after their completion, the South Bridge vaults were abandoned once and for all. But at a street level, business was as usual. The officials decided to fill the vaults with rubble for security purposes. Buried and forgotten, the memory of a once teeming merchant quarter of Edinburgh slowly faded from people's minds. Now, this is where the story gets a bit weird. During the 1980s, a Scottish rugby player accidentally found a tunnel leading into the vaults. The athlete didn't waste any time and started excavating the vaults with the help of his son. Several tons of rubble, and a decade later, the South Bridge vaults have been restored to their former glory, so to speak. They were again dark and damp as they were back in the 1700s. There were many interesting finds in this underground city. The vaults were littered with oyster shells, which were the standard diet for a working-class resident of Edinburgh at the time. Other finds, such as shoes and empty bottles, suggested that people actually lived in these claustrophobic vaults. Think of this the next time you see someone trying to rent their garage as an apartment. So, your guide was right. There really is a hidden city under the streets of Edinburgh. Well, at least one street. You have now gone down from the main pedestrian street into Cowgate. You look up and there it is, the only visible arch of the once impressive bridge. You are now searching online to book a tour of the vaults. You just have to see this place with your own eyes. But the Scottish capital isn't the only city with a mysterious underground. The historic region of Cappadocia in central Turkey hides no less than 36 cities beneath the ground. The biggest and the most impressive one wasn't discovered until 1963. It was built during the Byzantine era to protect the local population from invaders. We have similar structures made out of concrete in our cities, but the level of the Turkish underground city is really impressive. There are several levels, like in a multi-story car garage. The caves and tunnels lie 197 feet underground. That's 2/3 of the Statue of Liberty's height. The city could house 20,000 people at any given time, complete with livestock and food. The smell. Anyway, 20,000 is the average attendance at Major League Soccer matches today. You might want to add a field trip to one of these places the next time you go to Turkey. Most of these cities in Cappadocia can be found in rural areas. Makes sense, right? After all, they were dug out as hiding places. But in Europe, there is one city whose underground labyrinth resembles the vaults of Edinburgh. You've probably heard of Pilsen in the Czech Republic. But hold on a second, this isn't going to be a story of the most famous local product, something brewed perhaps? It's the story of a medieval city that survived underneath the streets of Pilsen. Water wells, cellars, and passageways stretch for more than 12 miles. Merchants and craftspeople used Pilsen's historical underground for storage. Water, food, ice, you name it. The waterworks are pretty impressive. Historians estimate that 360 wells are located under Pilsen's historical town center. In times of instability, the passageways served as safe havens for the locals. They definitely didn't go thirsty down there. Today, most tourists visit these mysterious underground cities. But in Canada, there's one where people live and work. The construction of Montreal's underground city began in 1962. The initial idea was to shelter traffic. That's a nice way to say that city officials were building a metro station. The idea caught on, and the project expanded. Now, it's a real-life urban maze hidden under the downtown area. Need a place to stay? There are hotels down there. Want to grab a bite? Step into one of the underground restaurants. Multiple shops, a library, cinemas, the list is long. There are even residential complexes. But how can people live under the ground? Simple. Although the city itself lies beneath the earth, the access points are at ground level. You can enter the 20-mile-long tunnel network at more than 120 places. Oh, that's another place down under. Oops, sorry, Australia. Stonehenge took approximately 20 million man-hours to build. For comparison, an average human doesn't live much over 700,000 hours. This is Jack, one of the first builders of Stonehenge. Let's say Jack lived to be 80 years old, which is extremely improbable, but it makes it easier for me to crunch the numbers, thanks. If Jack had spent his entire life, from age 0 to age 80, working on the Stonehenge project, it would have required approximately 28.5 generations of people doing the same thing to complete it. That's next to impossible. To make it more plausible, let's multiply that by 2. After all, Jack wouldn't want to dedicate his entire life to moving stones, and he didn't live to be that old. Thus, we arrive at around 57 generations needed to build Stonehenge. That's not enough room on the screen for me to introduce John, Jack's great-great-great-great, you get the drift, grandson. So it all began around 5,000 years ago with just a simple circular earthen bank and ditch. Fast forward to around 26,000 BCE, and the builders replaced that initial structure with a complex arrangement of wooden posts and brought in around 80 dolerite bloom stones from Wales, which were rearranged at least 3 times. Then, a few hundred years later, they added those massive sarsen stones, each weighing around 25 tons. These enormous sandstone blocks were transported about 19 miles to create a continuous outer circle, with 5 trilithons, 2 upright stones topped with a lintel, forming a horseshoe shape inside. It was a millennium-long building process that demanded years of hard work. So, people must have lived nearby, right? But how would they have found shelter back then? Today, we have houses for builders on site, small accommodations that serve as temporary housing. But structures like this definitely didn't exist when Stonehenge was constructed, did they? Well, actually, they existed, and some recent archaeological digs near Stonehenge prove it. Archaeologists found this Stone Age eco-home, which is a huge deal since it's one of the earliest settlements in the area. This newly uncovered Mesolithic home dates back to around the year 4300 BCE. Let's take a closer look at this house, shall we? Now, for the walls, people back then used a large fallen tree, its trunk to be more precise. These wooden walls were reinforced with flint, and they even lined the pit left by the uprooted tree with cobblestones. To create the roof, they opted for animal hides, which sounds like a wise choice. They must have provided protection against the unpredictable weather of the British Isles. Now, you might be wondering, the weather in Britain is indeed unpredictable, and it has been that way since time immemorial. So, how did the builders manage throughout most of the year, particularly during the winter months? Well, the answer is simple. There was a hearth on site, which isn't surprising, but the system they employed was quite ingenious. A hearth inside the house would have posed too great a risk, yet bringing hot stones into the dwelling was perfectly safe. While they were hot, they couldn't ignite the building. So they used these stones from the hearth as a heat storage system to keep warm at night. And as a final touch, they even incorporated various stones for decoration. They didn't exactly get a Pinterest house, but it added a touch of elegance for sure. And if you think this discovery is merely about the houses, think again. It significantly changes our understanding of how people lived during that time. This discovery places them in an important prehistoric setting right at the start of the Neolithic area, sparking some interesting questions about whether these early folks could be related to the people who built Stonehenge. But there's a big worry. Experts are concerned that this significant find, along with other buried archaeological sites, could be at risk if the authorities go ahead with plans to build a tunnel to reroute the A303 away from the World Heritage Site. Sure thing the house the scientists found wasn't in perfect shape, and it lacked some crucial elements people use for living. Some of them decayed over time, while others were simply absent. So the scientists took 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw, and used all this to recreate the 4,500-year-old design houses. These new buildings are located close to Stonehenge. which is incredible since in this area, planning permission for even a new cowshed is problematic. So, what are these houses like? Well, first off, there are 4 of them, and they're oval-shaped. They're built on the foundation of real houses that stood there about 4,500 years ago, just around the time the Stonehenge Eco House was going up. The houses aren't very big, they're single-room structures. When it comes to dimensions, it was straightforward to estimate since we could gauge the size of the roof and the height of the walls based on the foundations. Each side measures about 16 feet. However, the roof structure remains a bit of a mystery. There were a few differing thatching techniques back then, so pinpointing the exact method used for these dwellings is kind of a guessing game. For now, we think it involves knotted or tied straw carefully secured onto a hazel-woven frame. When fires are lit, the smoke from the hearth wafts up through the thatched roof. Now, remember those 20 tons of chalk? That was needed for the floors and walls. The white chalk walls and floors reflect sunlight and capture heat from the fire. But here's the kicker. The builders encountered a challenge because the ground was so waterlogged that some of the chalk floors took weeks to dry out. By the time they should have been bone dry, they were still as sticky as chewing gum. Now, it's safe to say people 4,500 years ago faced similar struggles, and we can really appreciate what they went through while building their homes. The final layer of daub was applied using rags, giving a smooth, almost shiny finish that looks surprisingly classy. The interiors are furnished with wooden and wicker beds and shelves, along with clay pots and jars, all centered around a cozy hearth. The spaces feel surprisingly roomy and are filled with light that streams in through the thatched roof, bouncing off those white walls. Plus, the woven furniture adds a nice touch of authenticity to the vibe. The fires have been lit, and the first meal, bread crafted from flour ground on a stone mill next to the hearth, has been prepared. Those who tried the bread were pleasantly surprised by its flavor, finding it quite tasty. Now, here comes the bummer. Those who recreated the houses did cheat a little. While the materials used were authentic, the tools weren't. They used cement mixers to mix the daub, wheelbarrows to transport the timber, and logs by the hearth were split with steel axes instead of stone ones. Still, the builders aren't professionals, they're volunteers. So I think a bit of cheating is totally cool in this case. There are other volunteers on site who are more than happy to chat about the daily activities of the Stonehenge builders, from grinding grain with a quern to making rope from rushes. But these houses and the Eco House aren't the only remarkable things in the Stonehenge area. Some years ago, archaeologists uncovered a burial site close to Stonehenge that predates the monument itself. This Neolithic long barrow, dating back approximately 56 to 5,700 years, likely contains the remains of some of Britain's earliest inhabitants. The burial site was identified through aerial images that revealed its distinct shape beneath the crops. Salisbury Plain is rich with ancient sites, including Stonehenge, various mounds, and monuments. The area has remained undisturbed over the centuries, which is likely why so many ancient structures are still intact. This discovery also shows a significant shift in human lifestyle during that era, marking a transition from a nomadic existence to settled farming and animal husbandry, much like the Eco House itself. The long barrow in question measures about 85 feet long and 65 feet wide, though much of its above-ground structure has been lost to farming over the years. If this site is like others in the vicinity, it contains the remains of 30 to 50 individuals, along with cow skulls, which were significant to those early communities.
Stonehenge is famous, but it isn't the oldest UK monument of its kind in England. That title belongs to Flagstones, a site that predates Stonehenge by about 200 years. In fact, it's possible that whoever built Stonehenge might have been copycats, or perhaps, as some prefer, inspired by flagstones. Let's start unraveling the mystery of flagstones by looking at its exact age. To crack this ancient puzzle, scientists turned to a powerful technique: radiocarbon dating prehistoric monuments. This method works on organic materials like wood, bone, or charcoal that are up to about 60,000 years old. Each of these materials contains something called carbon-14. When an organism passes away, its carbon-14 starts to break down at a predictable rate. By measuring how much is left, scientists can estimate the age of these ancient objects. The method is really impressive, so it doesn't come as a surprise that the inventor of this method was awarded the Nobel Prize. Radiocarbon dating has revealed that people built flagstones around 3200 BCE, making it older than even the earliest parts of Stonehenge. But the mystery of flagstones is just beginning to unfold. Flagstones is located in Dorset, in southwest England, about 37 miles away from Stonehenge. It was discovered in the 1980s when workers were building a new road. Archaeologists dug up a huge circular ditch about 330 feet wide, made with overlapping pits. Inside the pits, they found the remains of at least 7 people, a cremated adult, 3 young individuals, and 3 other adults whose bodies were partly cremated. This shows that people could have used the site as an ancient cremation burial site. Flagstones is basically a big ancient circle that popped up right where early farming communities were spending their time. If you went there today, you wouldn't see any obvious walls or banks, but if you look inside the pits that make up the circle, you'll find chalk rubble from both sides. That's a clue that when people dug these pits, they used the dirt and chalk they took out to build up banks both inside and outside the circle. This special spot sits right in the middle of a whole bunch of other really old monuments and sites, which were built over thousands of years during the Neolithic and Bronze Ages. Experts have figured out the ages of some of these nearby places really well. For example, the ditch at Maiden Castle dates back to around 3600 BCE, and the Big Henge at Mount Pleasant was built around 2600 BCE. Today, half of Flagstones is under that road, and the other half is under an old historic house looked after by the National Trust. You can find objects from the site at the Dorset Museum. Because flagstones and early Stonehenge look so similar, with round enclosures, pits, and cremated burials, scientists used to think they appeared at the same time. But thanks to radiocarbon dating, we now know Flagstones, this ancient cremation burial site, is the earliest big circular monument ever found in Britain. To figure out how old the site really is, researchers tested things like human bones, red deer antlers, and charcoal found there. One of the most puzzling discoveries was a young man who was buried under a huge sarsen stone in the middle of the circle. Someone left him there about 1,000 years after people used the site for the first time. This find just added to the mystery of flagstones. You're probably wondering about the flagstones versus Stonehenge comparison. Well, the latter is a mystery on its own, a big old circle of giant stones in the south of England. Those who made it didn't write anything down, so we don't know exactly what they were thinking. One old tale says that King Arthur's wizard, Merlin, used magic to move the stones from Ireland, where giants had put them together. Another story says that people from Denmark built it. Today, some people think extraterrestrial visitors made it. A man named John Aubrey started studying Stonehenge in the 1660s. He thought the Celts had built it for their priests, called Druids, but that turned out to be wrong. Radiocarbon dating of this prehistoric monument shows that its constructors built it in phases over several centuries. The construction started around 3100 BCE and continued till around 1600 BCE. First, about 5,000 years ago, it was just a round ditch in the ground. Then people added wooden posts. Around 2600 BCE, they brought big blue stones from Wales. Later, they added sarsens, even bigger stones, each weighing as much as 5 elephants. They moved those stones from 19 miles away and placed them in a big circle with 5 tall stone arches shaped like a horseshoe. Experts think building Stonehenge took more than 20 million hours of hard work, and that's a lot of teamwork, strength, and planning for people who didn't even have machines. These days, There are a few different ideas about what Stonehenge was really used for. Some experts think it was a sacred place where people gathered for religious ceremonies. Others believe it was an early kind of science center used to study the sky and track time. Both groups notice that the stones at Stonehenge are lined up with the sun and moon, so people may have used the site to mark the changing seasons, especially during the summer and winter solstices. Some think it worked like a giant calendar, helping people figure out dates or predict things like solar eclipses. Stonehenge was an ancient cremation burial site too, at least for some time. Anyway, if we continue with the Flagstones versus Stonehenge comparison, we can't but dwell more on the age of these monuments. Flagstones is older than Stonehenge. In fact, it's one of the oldest UK monuments. It's really special because it's the most ancient big round enclosure ever found in Britain. According to the newest studies, its age is about 5,200 years old. After it was built, more and more round monuments started popping up in other places too. Before its construction, most ancient monuments were long and straight, like rectangular barrows or burial mounds, or long ditches called cursus monuments. Some had even more random shapes, but the Flagstones monument shows a big change. People were starting to build in circles instead. Some experts think this idea of circular monuments might have come from Ireland, where people were already burying cremated bodies in round tombs. On the other hand, even though Flagstones has turned out to be older than Stonehenge, the new findings suggest that Stonehenge might need to be redated. Some of the objects found at Stonehenge, like animal bones, are actually older than the main structure itself. For example, near the entrances to Stonehenge, archaeologists found deer bones and cattle skulls that date to around 3,200 BCE. Experts used to think that people kept those bones for a long time before burying them. But it's possible there was an early version of Stonehenge made from overlapping pits that existed before the big circular ditch was built around 2,900 BCE. Now, could Flagstones and Stonehenge have been part of a bigger shared tradition? Could there have been other ancient cremation burial sites in the UK? After all, these constructions aren't the only round prehistoric monuments in Britain. In Wales, there's a similar site called Stonehenge, which also looks like a circular burial place. Such a way of burying the deceased might have been a common custom across the UK because you can see similar structures in Eastern Ireland. In the Boyne Valley, for example, there are ancient places like the Mound of the Hostages that people used in the same way. Now, researchers want to do more digging in Ireland to see if some of those monuments were built before 3,200 BCE. If they're even older than flagstones, they might help explain where the idea of building round burial sites started and why people across Britain and Ireland were building them. The more we learn, the better we'll understand what these sites were really for and how the people back then might have shared beliefs and traditions across the sea. Hopefully, one day, we'll figure out the mystery of flagstones, one of the oldest monuments in the UK.
There are countless stores all over the world that haven't been open for decades, and even centuries. The question is why? It seems that nowadays you can open any door you want. The truth is that some doors were sealed for a grave reason. And so far, nobody has found out what treasures and mysteries they hide. Here are 4 doors that keep their secrets all too well. The Taj Mahal. First up, we've got the Taj Mahal in India, one of the most romantic places in the world. Shah Jahan commissioned it in 1631 and dedicated it to his 3rd wife, who he loved like crazy. They were married for 19 years and had a whopping 14 kids together. But unfortunately, she passed away while giving birth to their last baby. Shah Jahan was heartbroken and decided to build an epic tomb to remember her by. The construction took a whopping 20 years to finish. The building has quite an interesting layout. The design is super unusual with these 4 massive 130-foot tall minarets that stand on the corners of a huge platform. They're not just there for looks. Back in the 17th century, architects were having some serious issues with buildings collapsing under their own weight. So, the chief architect of the Taj Mahal made sure to place those minarets as far away from the tomb as possible. And he even tilted them in a way so that if they did fall, they wouldn't wreck the rest of the Taj Mahal. Talk about planning ahead. The Taj Mahal is hiding some crazy secrets. There are sealed rooms all over the place that nobody is allowed to enter. And if you check out photos of the building from the riverside, you can spot 2 basements. But guess what? They're sealed up too. Nobody knows what's inside or why they've been locked up since the time of Shah Jahan. Apparently, there's a good reason why those rooms are off limits. Some researchers think that they were built using marble, which turns into a different substance called calcium carbonate if it's exposed to carbon dioxide. And when that happens, little bits of marble start chipping off like crazy. To make matters worse, there's no air flowing into these rooms. That means that if too much CO2 builds up in the basement, the 4 minarets could collapse. But wait, there's more. Some people think that the body of Shah Jahan's wife can be found in one of these sealed-up rooms in pristine condition. Why not? Who knows what the mysterious rooms might keep? The Great Sphinx of Giza. The Great Sphinx of Giza is shrouded in mystery. It's not just the largest monolith statue in the world, but it's also a hybrid creature with a woman's head and a lion's body that originates from Egyptian and Greek mythology. It's also very ancient. It's estimated to be around 4,500 years old. The construction of this marvel took about 3 years and required 100 workers who were not slaves and were treated with delicacies like sheep and goat meat. It is also thought that it used to be much more massive than it is now. Archaeologists found huge stone blocks and abandoned toolkits near the site. However, the real secrets of the Sphinx lie underground, near its paws. A group of scientists used a seismograph to detect 2 hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx's paws. Some people think that these rooms might be the legendary Hall of Records, which holds ancient scrolls revealing the secrets of the universe. I mean, that's way cooler than any library I've ever been to. Rumor has it that the Egyptians even had info on Atlantis stashed down there, which is like a super old version of a conspiracy theory. Unfortunately, we can't go on an adventure to check it out just yet. The chambers presumably have 2 entrances, but both remain sealed. The researchers haven't yet received the green light to check out their theory. Let's hope they won't keep us in suspense forever. Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple. This temple is located in the beautiful state of Kerala in India. This temple is famous for more than just its breathtaking beauty. Underneath the temple there are 6 vaults, creatively named A, B, C, D, E, and F. The enormous iron doors to these chambers add to the mystery of what's behind them. A few years back, the authorities decided to open these vaults to the world, but it wasn't an easy task. You can't just open the doors and enter the vaults. It required a lot of work. It took them a while, but finally, in 2011, they opened 5 of the 6 chambers. And guess what they found? Tons of treasure. Bags of gold, precious gemstones, and priceless diamond jewelry. The estimated worth of everything found in the vaults is a whopping $1 trillion. It's like the temple was the real-life inspiration for Aladdin's Cave of Wonders. But wait, I said 5 of the 6. What happened to the last one? Vault B has remained closed, but not for lack of trying. They simply didn't manage to open it. There is even a belief that it's fatally cursed. Legend says that only a saint or sage can break the curse by chanting a specific mantra. But no one has been able to do this yet, presumably because we don't have saints or sages at our disposal. There is also rumor that in the 30s some temple invaders tried to enter Vault B to do some good old looting. But they never reached their target. Apparently terrible snakes materialized out of nowhere and chased the gang away. But of course, this is just an urban legend, and there is not proof of that. However, it is said that the Auditor General dealing with the temple claimed that Vault B had been opened at least 7 times since 1990, and nothing bad happened to anyone who entered. Who knows? Maybe we should send Indiana Jones to check it out. The First Emperor's Tomb. Deep under a hill, completely undisturbed and surrounded by dangerous traps, lies an ancient 2,000-year-old tomb. It belongs to Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He was born in the Qin state and became king when he was just a boy. But when he grew up and gained full power, he united the warring states ancient China was divided into by conquering them. After that, he created the Qin dynasty. When he died in 210 BCE, they buried him deep underground in a massive tomb. And when I say massive, I mean massive! Back in 1974, some farmers in Xi'an, China, stumbled upon something strange while digging a well, a huge terracotta soldier. This discovery led to an extensive archaeological dig that has continued for over 40 years, revealing a collection of thousands of clay soldiers. The unique thing about these soldiers is that each one has its own unique features, from hairstyles to facial expressions. It's believed that there could be up to 8,000 of these soldiers, but only 2,000 have been found so far. Interestingly, the central tomb, which is believed to be the resting place of the emperor, is still untouched. In ancient records, there are references to a vast underground city that the emperor built, complete with scenic towers, palaces, and whatnot. Sima Qian, a Han Dynasty historian, wrote that the tomb was adorned with treasures and had space for hundreds of officials, but the lack of technology to properly examine the site is what's holding things up. Qin Shi Huang was surrounded by liquid mercury in his tomb, with two of the streams representing the major rivers of China, Yellow River and Yangtze. The ancient Chinese believed that mercury could provide immortality, but it could have also caused the emperor's death since he regularly took mercury pills to prolong his life. The dangerous levels of mercury contamination in the soil near the tomb are the main reason why scientists are reluctant to explore it. It could be very dangerous both for people and for the environment. Now, if I had to choose which door to open, I'd probably go for the one that doesn't lead to a tomb surrounded by poisonous mercury. Call me crazy, but I'd like to avoid any potential health hazards.
Hey, I have an invitation for you. Pack your bags and let's head down to the world's most visited city, Paris. The city of love, the city of blinding lights, or whatever you want to call it. Our goal is to uncover as many secrets as possible regarding the world-famous Musée du Louvre. Are you up for it? Grab your travel book and bon voyage! The Louvre makes a big impression if you're visiting it for the first time. The traditional French Renaissance architecture is mixed with some modern elements, like the Louvre Pyramid. And that's our first stop today. To get inside the museum, you can go through the huge glass pyramid sitting right there in the Louvre's courtyard. If you're wondering what's the deal with this pyramid, let's stop here for a few minutes and learn some more about it. The Louvre Pyramid hasn't been here since the beginning. After all, the Louvre's main building, aka the Louvre Palace, dates back to 1190. But before it looked like what you see today, this place was a castle, full of moats and dungeons. And not dragons, because those aren't real, unfortunately. Anyways, the palace was commissioned by French King Philip II. Oh, and you can check out some of the medieval Louvre in the museum's basement. The Louvre only became a museum quite recently, historically speaking. In 1793, after the French Revolution, the nation decided that this building would be used to display France's prized collection of art. It wasn't until the 1980s that the idea of the glass pyramid came along. Then President François Mitterrand issued a big renovation of the Louvre. The project was called Grand Louvre, and it included the construction of a new entrance for visitors. By the 80s, the museum had already been receiving millions of visitors per year, and the entrance would often get crowded. And that's when foreign architect Io Ming Pei comes along. Mitterrand hired Pei to build an entrance that would connect the museum's 3 pavilions, and if you ask me, I'd say he did a pretty good job. We're talking about 200 tons of glass and iron. Not to mention that this glass, the so-called diamond glass, was specially designed to be completely transparent, without any green or blue tint to it. Pei wanted visitors to have a clear view of the main buildings without the glass interfering with it. It took 2 years just to get the glass color right. It also took a while before Pei decided he was going to build a pyramid. He experimented with designing a cube and even a hemisphere. But since the original building doesn't have any curves, this would make the courtyard piece too out of context. So he decided to build a pyramid instead, inspired by the ones in Egypt. After all, the Louvre holds an immense collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts, so that kind of makes sense. Just a wild guess here. The thing is, the French are pretty critical, and once the Louvre pyramid was finished in 1988, it became the center of a very heated debate. Public opinion was unsettled by such a modern construction. Today, people take all kinds of weird selfies with the pyramid, but back then, locals were saying that the modern architecture had nothing to do with the Louvre's Renaissance style, or even the history of the building. Some even said that the pyramid wasn't French enough. Yikes! Standing in line to get inside the Louvre, you can't help but wonder, how do people clean this huge glass pyramid? We're talking glass slopes, so this sure isn't an easy feat. In the beginning, the museum administration apparently hired mountaineers to climb it and clean it. And some still do this job nowadays when the robot built for this task can't clean all the dirty spots off the glass. I'm not joking. The Louvre pyramid is cleaned by a robot. You know what they say, the future is here. Once you're down the escalators, you'll notice that this awesome pyramid you were taking pictures with upstairs has an inverted face to it downstairs. It serves as a skylight to the Carousel du Louvre, which is like an underground shopping mall or the museum's main lobby. Hey, look, there's an Apple store, except that the French people pronounce it Apple. You'll have the option to choose from 3 different wings of the museum, the Richelieu, Sully, or Denon. I say we begin with Denon. You'll understand why in a bit. Did you know that the Louvre exhibits around 35,000 pieces of art? That's why it's virtually impossible to visit everything in one day. If you're an art lover, you'll have to come back here for more visits. But to see all the pieces of art, spending around 30 seconds on each, you'd have to visit the Louvre over 100 times. And that's not counting restroom and lunch breaks. You get the picture, right? The museum is huge. That's why it takes about a 10-minute walk to get from the lobby entrance to the Louvre's most famous painting, the Mona Lisa. But since you're here early, you managed to take good pictures of this Da Vinci masterpiece. A little known fact, the Mona Lisa was once stolen from the Louvre. It was once stolen at night by a man called Vincenzo Peruggia. He was an employee of the museum, and investigators think he slept inside the Louvre to perform what is known as the greatest art theft of the 20th century. Apparently, the next morning, Vincenzo simply walked out of the museum with the Mona Lisa hidden among his belongings. The Mona Lisa was gone for almost 2 years until the painting was recovered in Italy. Who knows, maybe she enjoyed the trip back to her homeland. If you're an art history buff, you might know that the Mona Lisa has lots of theories revolving around it. The painting is shrouded in mystery, that's a fact. A strong case has been made that the Mona Lisa could be a self-portrait of Da Vinci himself. Historians have compared Da Vinci's face and that of the Mona Lisa, and guess what? They appear to be strikingly similar. Also, a 2010 study done by Italy's Committee for Cultural Heritage found that there is a collection of symbols hidden in the painting. These are only visible through highly technological magnifying lenses, but they showed that Leonardo inscribed an LV inside Mona Lisa's right eye. Experts guess that this is Da Vinci's signature, but the other symbols, a CE in the left eye and a 72 in the arch of the background bridge, are still a mystery. But enough about La Gioconda. We want to get to the Sully wing of the museum. Along the way, you'll see some people sitting in front of paintings with a drawing book or even a canvas. Is that allowed? Yep, this is a very interesting feature of the Musée du Louvre. The museum houses an art school called École du Louvre. The students of this school, as well as other Parisian institutions, can get permits to sit in front of paintings and copy them. This way, promising young artists can learn directly from the source. They copy the works of Renoir, Monet, and Poussin, trying to figure out the techniques these painters used. Can I sign up for this, please? To finish your tour, you're visiting the ancient moat we talked about earlier in this video. You know, the one that was part of the original Louvre when it was still a castle. Thanks to the archaeological excavations that happened in the 1980s, This part was uncovered and has been open for visitation since 2016. You can even see a miniature model of what the original castle looked like. And if you visited other landmarks in Paris, you'll notice that it's pretty similar to the Conciergerie. I wonder if they've ever thought about producing cheese down here. It seems like the perfect place. Oh well, I hope you enjoyed learning some secrets of the world's most famous museum. See you next time!
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.